Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this special meeting of Fernie City Council held at 6:31 p.m. on January 30th, 2025. Keys to Kukit. We acknowledge the city of Fernie is located within Kukanamakas, the unceded territory of Yakutat Nucleat First Nation. We recognize that we live and work within their vast lands. The Kanahunik are from Yakutat Nucleat and are members of the Ktunaxa-speaking peoples of British Columbia, Idaho, and Montana. I'll call this special meeting to order, and I will ask for a mover and a seconder for the following staff recommendation that the agenda of the January 30th, 2025 special council meeting be adopted. Moved by Councillor Audia Kelly, seconded by Councillor McIsaac. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. That's unanimous. I'll now open the floor to public participation and invite the public in attendance or participating electronically who wish to comment on items listed on the meeting agenda in accordance with section 3.7.3 of the procedure bylaw to address council, except speakers must not address council regarding a matter for which a public hearing must be held or has been held pursuant to the Local Government Act prior to council's consideration of the matter or adoption of the bylaw. Speakers must not address council regarding a permit for which public notice must be given or has been given pursuant to the Local Government Act prior to council's consideration of the issuance of the permit. And a speaker may only address council for a maximum of 3 minutes. And as there is no one in attendance in the gallery, I'll turn to Ms. Chown and see if anyone online has indicated a desire to speak. No one has indicated a desire to speak. Thank you. Which moves us briskly along to the business of the evening. Item 5.1, the 2025 to 2029 financial plan operating budget, a presentation by our Director of Finance, Mr. Burdett.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. Good evening, Council. Tonight is the fourth meeting of our 2025 budget season, but really the first one where we start to get into the meat and potatoes. Our agenda for tonight, I have a couple of introductory and recap slides, and then we'll revisit the 10 financial plan guidelines in detail that staff used to prepare this budget. These guidelines were presented to Council in October and November of last year. Then I have a slide or two on some of our opportunities this year, but also some significant risks that we're facing. Lastly, I will close with some more department-focused slides that summarize the changes from 2024. As I said, this is our fourth budget meeting this 2025 cycle. October 26, Council approved the budget guidelines that staff used in preparing this year's budget. We did a budget process check-in on November 22nd. At that time, staff was estimating a draft tax increase of 7.8%, and we'll see later this evening that it's now closer to 6.8%. Staff also presented some slides on what our infrastructure deficit is with the data we have available to us at present, and it's over $60 million. And as we said at that meeting, it's actually in reality probably well over 200 million, but as was discussed at that meeting, we are lacking in data for a lot of our assets and are working on refining this number every day. And then December 10th, we did an amendment to the 2024 budget bylaw year 2 to help us get started on some bigger purchasing items this year. And just a note here on the process for Council, tonight's meeting and also the February 4th and February 12th meetings are meant to be purely information sessions. Staff is not seeking direction on a specific resolution to adopt a financial plan. These meetings are to provide Council with budget information to support Council in reviewing the financial plan, engaging in dialogue and discussion on the budget, and providing direction as required. Staff will be seeking specific direction on a tax rate bylaw on February 25th. Council has a month with the binders and to ask questions of staff whenever they like, and we're here to answer them for the next month.
For the purposes of this evening, Mr. Burdett, sorry, would you like us to ask questions as we go? Do you have certain junctures where you'd prefer questions?
Nope, you can stop me as you like. I do have a few slides that I'm going to stop intentionally and open it up for discussion on a few items that are a little different than usual. But other than that, you can stop me whenever.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. I have another kind of a little request. I've made a bunch of notes and unfortunately it's on my computer right now. I'm just wondering if it would be okay with the staff if I send an email if I miss some of the items tonight.
Oh, I think so. I think Mr. Burdett indicated ask questions at any time. So I think that certainly works.
Yeah, I mean, I will bring it up in a public meeting too, some of the bigger points, but I don't want to have like a laundry list of 25 questions that I'll be asking.
No, fair. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, please do email me and I'll make sure all of council and the public get the answers. And a little later in this presentation, there was some emails from last week that I've included in the slide deck for tonight. So I'll just keep doing it that way. And, you know, I mean, as you can see, there's a lot of line items in that binder, and we've certainly done the best job we can and making sure they're accurate, but you know, 7 extra sets of eyes doesn't hurt either. So please, yeah, feel free.
Thank you, Mr. Burdett. And just for council, I'll probably have a break about an hour and 15 minutes in, just so that we can keep going. Councillor Adi Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. CFO, could we get all your PowerPoints as well? I know you sent them to us last year. I find it really helpful.
Yep.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And for your reference, Mr. Mayor, this is slide 4 of 52. So if we, an hour and 15 minutes later, if we're on 51, I'll let you know.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. This slide is the budget schedule itself. Again, tonight we're going through our operating budget. Tuesday, the 4th, February 4th, will be our capital plan and reserves. February 12th, I'm calling that the drill down meeting. And, you know, if over these first 2 meetings, council asks questions that require a little more investigation by staff, it can be tabled and brought back to council at this 12th meeting. Furthermore, if council would like to explore a specific change in service level, or perhaps explore the impact of not doing a particular project, we can make note of this and bring that back to the meeting on the 12th as well. And then February 10th, which is not on this council meeting schedule, there is the business banter budget event at the Chamber of Commerce at 5:30 p.m. And February 19th is our regular budget open house here at the Senior Center at 6:30 p.m. And February 25th, which is back to the regular meeting of council schedule, will be a recap, summary of public input and further discussion, and then a request for official direction around tax rate from council. And then finally, 3 meetings for readings of the bylaw with adoption scheduled for March 25th. So what is a municipal budget? Very simply, it determines how much money will be raised by the city, how much money is spent, and what it's spent on. At a high level, the budget is split into 3 major sections. One is the operating budget, which is day-to-day budget, which we're going over tonight. In here would be expenses like wages, benefits, insurance, utilities like heat and electricity, repairs, operating supplies like chlorine from the pool, sand for the roads, and so on. Number 2 is our capital budget. Capital would be larger expenditures that the city plans on using for a period of time longer than 12 months. A few examples of these would be vehicles, the official community plan, playgrounds, building upgrades that in theory extend the useful life of a building. And the third is our utilities budget, utilities being defined in this case by water and sewer. Both water and sewer have their own operating and capital budgets. And the reason they're split out from the regular operating budget is because their funding source is different. Property tax does not fund water and sewer. Water and sewer is mainly funded by the quarterly utility bills. A municipal budget every year must be done via.
Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. Just a quick question. You said the water and sewer budget are mainly funded to our utility bills. What is the other source of funding for that?
I mean, mostly grants that become available for larger projects. Yeah, we're not allowed for the community charter to transfer reserves that were funded through taxation to pay for water and sewer projects. Welcome.
Thank you.
A municipal budget every year must be done via a council-approved bylaw. This budget bylaw must be for a period of 5 years. And so, you know, we're doing 2025 budget in February. It's mainly because we're still operating with last year's budget bylaw, which, because that was for 5 years, includes this year as well. These bylaws must be submitted to the province every year by May 15th for review.
Councilor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just curious, over the many years, decades of municipal services across provinces, have we had any example of a surplus wherein you had more revenue coming in than how much you expended?
Thank you, Councilor Ramirez. Not in the budget. That's not allowed. But, you know, if something happens that, I don't know, Mr. Bornowski.
Again?
Sure.
Council will recall the year we secured the grant for the Affordable Housing and Childcare Project. It wasn't in our budget, and at the end of the year, we showed a surplus because we had additional revenues. We're still in the process of spending those, so it's not like we had a surprise surplus, but we do, depending on non-market growth, depending on other factors. If we get a grant mid-year, we wind up with a small surplus at the end of the year. Yep. And it does happen at the end of the year, you have functional surpluses. Generally, those then get transferred into your general operating reserve, and it happens in municipalities across BC, certainly.
Councilor Audie Kelly, you had a question?
Thanks, Your Worship. Yeah, a CFO. So, we have to balance to zero, right? So we base the tax rate that we need to do that. So going a little bit from what Councilor Ramirez said, if we would just have a lower tax rate rather than a surplus, right? Like if our deficit, say we weren't going to have a deficit, like we weren't going to have a need, we would just have a lower rate, would we not?
That's right. Yeah. If we were budgeting a surplus, yeah, council could adopt a reduction in tax. Absolutely. A municipality's budget, again, must be balanced. It's not like federal budgets where they're always talking about surplus or shortfall. We don't have that option. I guess we just covered this, but it's in my notes. And so really our only two options when it comes to balancing the budget is either by raising the amount of revenue we bring in to meet increasing costs, or by finding and utilizing new and efficient ways of doing things to reduce costs. And the city of Fernie, since I've been here, which is just over 4 years, has been utilizing a mix of both options. And then lastly, just a note on surplus. I see this kind of question pop up in various forms every year. And if you look at our income statement from our audited statements, which is snipped on this slide here, there are our revenues and then expenses and then annual surplus. But what's not included on our income statement is our contributions to reserves or capital purchases. So it looks like we run surpluses, but it's really just how our financial statements are presented. So for this year, how much money are we expecting to come in? The biggest source of funds, no surprise, is property tax, which comes from single-family residences, businesses, and we also get a portion of the property tax paid to the province by the mines in Sparwood and Elkford. Special assessments are parcel taxes we collect, an example of which is the parcel tax on some West Fernie residences, which is collected to help pay the cost over 30 years of their sewer infrastructure when they amalgamated with Fernie in 2018. Emergency services is the amount we get from the regional district to provide fire services at the ski hill. Solid waste collection is part of your quarterly utility fees. The next 8 lines here, from arena rental to curling club rental, is the amount we raise from our programs and daily rentals at our various facilities. Permits and licenses, halfway down the page, are mostly related to building permits, development permits, engineering reviews, business licenses, etc. Fines are mostly made up of parking, towing fees, and animal bylaw infractions.
Councilor McIsaac.
Oh, I thought you were going to call me when you got to the last line.
I just wanted to ask about the last line on this, which is the transfer from reserves, which we show as revenue, but really it's just taking money out of the bank, which now I don't want to compare my household to the operation of the city, but I wouldn't consider a withdrawal from my bank account as income. So why do we classify it that way?
It's a great question, Councillor McIsaac. And it's really how the Public Sector Accounting Board requires us to present our financial statements. So we're required to have that line show up as an income to the city. But you're right, it's not revenue. And then you know, to offset that, we have our capital expenses, which in a normal business is a balance sheet item. And it does ultimately make it through to the balance sheet of the city, but you have to show it as an income and expense first. So it is very strange, but it's how public sector accounting it works.
Thank you.
Councillor Schussman.
Thanks, Mayor Milligan, if I may follow up. So conversely then, at the end of the year, when we have money that's left over and it gets sent to reserves, that shows up as an expense, even though it's still money we have then, yes? Okay,
That's correct, yep.
thank you.
Thank you for the clarity.
Rentals would be our longer term rentals. So for example, most of the long-term tenants in Max Church fall under here. Also the courthouse, we rent out to the province. Income and investments, fairly self-explanatory, but because property tax is due in July, the portion of that money that's meant to be used on our operating budget will earn interest until it's spent. And also our reserves earn interest too. The penalties that come from late tax payments go into the city's general revenue. Miscellaneous revenues for smaller services we provide, for example, really old pieces of equipment sometimes go to auction. We issue tax certificates for a fee is another example. Unconditional grants are grants from the province is a grant from the province called the Small Communities Grant. We get it every year and there are no conditions on what it can be used for. Grants and conditional transfers are grants we've been awarded that do have a specific purpose. They usually are put towards a capital project, but we do occasionally get an operational based grant, though those are usually quite a bit smaller. Transfers from reserves, as we just talked about, is money we pull out of reserves to pay for capital projects. All told, 2025 budgeted revenues is just over 30.9 million.
Councillor Rabideau.
Thanks, Your Worship. CFO, help us understand, like, what's an average home paying in property taxes as per this?
I've got it on a later slide, what the increase for an average home relates to, and I believe that's $193. I didn't have the full bill, but I think the total of that becomes something like 3,100 just for the city portion. You'd have to check my math with the 6.8%, but it's around there. Yeah, just for the city portion.
Councillor Eddie Kelly.
CFO, not right this minute, but at one of our upcoming meetings, could you give us the figure of where things started with the average home's property tax in 2021 and what the cumulative increase amounts to if we implement the 6.8? Like, what does that total look like? So if I was at $1,000 in 2021, what's my total going to be in 2025?
Yep, I can do that. I can do that for you tonight, I would say. Thank you. Now, how much money will go out? I won't go through all of these lines individually, but essentially, whenever you see a specific building, location, or asset, which for the most part is the top section of the right column on the screen, and then the bottom section of the left column is about 35 of those rows. Those numbers for those rows are the costs of running and maintaining those assets, includes salaries for maintenance staff, items like insurance, utilities are in there. The top section of 9 rows in the left column there is, in essence, our more administrative section. It includes items such as salaries for council, salaries for the finance department, including myself, AP, payroll, cash receipting, front desk customer service. corporate admin, which includes HR, communications, front desk support, safety. Asset management is in there as well. The main cost there is actually all of our computer support, maintenance, software subscriptions, and things like that. The grants line is our community investment, which is funding to the library, art station, senior center, visitor information center, and museum. Of note here is RMI. We have sort of a placeholder coming in our capital section for anticipated funding in 2025, though that agreement hasn't been formally renewed or announced yet by the province, though we don't have any reason to suspect it won't be soon coming from them. The second section on the left column is protective services, which includes fire, RCMP, and bylaw. And there's building inspection and planning there as well. There's a section for our engineering and the rest of the team at the operations facility. Lastly, the green section at the bottom of the right column is the interest and principal we pay on debt, the amount we transfer annually to our reserves, and the amount we intend to spend on capital projects this year. And then the dark blue line is the total of this slide's expenses. And then with the previous slide's revenues, that leaves us with a shortfall of just over $630,000 for 2025. So then what happens with this shortfall? Kind of touched on this earlier, but again, budget must be balanced. So if it's funded purely through a taxation increase.
Councillor Ramirez, sorry.
Thanks, Your Worship. Sorry for the disruption here, CFO. If you
No problem.
could please go back to one slide. And in the package that we had, I'm referring to page 9, category 2121. And I had for salaries, administration, $1,084,000. Here I see $1,449,000. Am I seeing two different items or are they the same?
It's a good question. That line is not just salaries, it's actually the total at the bottom of page 9 there.
Oh, yes, sorry, my
no
bad.
problem.
Sorry, yeah, got it.
If the shortfall is funded purely through a taxation increase, that would translate this year to a 6.8% increase. Last year's increase, for reference, was 6.1%. Both of these two numbers, while very high, are actually still one of the lowest that I've seen come in the province this year so far. We're still kind of early. It's still January, but as we do see more get adopted, I'll keep updating council on what other communities are doing. Excuse me. The other option would be a reduction in a specific
Councillor
service level.
Ramirez, your mic was on. You just turned it off. No, it's okay.
CFO, another thing, I don't know if it's just a coincidence or what, but having gone through this 2 times over, and this is our 3rd time, right? Last year, I believe we were in that 1/4 point difference between your estimate and where we came in at. And this time we went from what, 7.8 to 6.8. That's a 1 percentage point drop. Like, was that expected or is it just a coincidence that, this time we dropped?
Good
more
question.
than the last year's estimates.
Right. A couple of things. We did the estimate this year earlier. It was in November. So we had, fewer numbers ready to go. But the big reason for this increase is, and I'll touch on this later, but it is our property insurance. Since the start of COVID, options for securing property insurance became very limited all of a sudden. We only had one option. And then all of a sudden this year, we were shopping around to see if there was other options, and there are all of a sudden this year. So we were able to secure quite a bit better rate for insurance for our property, which is most of what accounted for that drop.
Thank you. Further?
I think that is a pretty good improvement in the process. So we are estimating sooner, and we have a better handle of where the costs are going. Is that fair assessment?
Yeah, I would say it's fair. And
Okay.
also, you said this is your 2nd time. This is only my 4th. So I feel like I'm getting better at knowing where to look,
Thank you, Mr. Burdick. Councillor Audie Kelly?
Thanks, Your Worship. CFO, just curious, So when we compare to other municipalities though, are we really comparing apples to apples? Because if, and maybe I'm misunderstanding, but if we're 94,500 for 1% of tax, is Cranbrook 1% of tax the same? Is Kelowna's? Like, so are we really comparing apples to apples? Like, should we really be concerned what other municipalities' tax rate is in comparison to ours? Because is it a valid comparison?
That's a really good question. And the answer is no, it's not. And I really caution council using any of these stats as anything other than a reference, you know. And I'll touch on this later. Specifically, we were talking about in an email last week about salaries as a percentage of budget. And I've got a speaking point on that slide. Again, cautioning council, because Fernie and every municipality has its own unique set of problems and unique portfolio. Even like topography affects how expensive it is here in Fernie, you know, so.
Yeah, our location affects things. Further?
Yeah, like I noticed, one of the things, I'm sorry, I'm gonna raise the infamous report. One of the things that was sort of pointed out was that our tax rate in Fernie has sort of been perennially above CPI, but again, I was trying to relate to that comment. So like, yeah, like I feel like we shouldn't get caught up in, let's say Cranbrook decides their tax rate's going to be 20%. Well, they have a different set of circumstances than us.
Mr. Boranowski, sorry.
Mayor and council, I think it's a really valid point. What services does the regional district provide in Creston or Cranbrook or Kelowna or Richmond versus the municipality? And that changes what side the balance sheet is on, and it changes who bears the cost for that. And the simple fact of it is, for a very long time in Fernie, the city of Fernie has provided almost all the services and almost all the funding for the community associations and groups and partners who also offer the secondary services. It just is a fact that the bulk of all that funding comes from and through the municipality here versus through a regional district or broader partnerships. And we are an isolated, remote municipality, quote unquote, although we have some centers an hour or so away. It's the reality of being a growing city that wants many, many services. We have a huge breadth. We offer a lot more than many other 5,000-7,000 person municipalities do. And we do so without those being offered frequently through the regional districts. So you need more people or more assets to do that.
Councilor McKaiser.
Thank you, Worship. Just because I'm unable to resist the devil's advocate position when it presents itself. The one thing I would like to say about that is I think it's very important not to treat our taxation as relative to everybody else. I think what's challenging is over the years, what we've seen is that when people want to be critical of our tax level, what they do is point out how it's lower in other places. That's not fair to do it then if you're not going to then give the credit now. The other thing I want to say about it is, while we are not linked in our taxation, and there's no reason why our taxes should be related to what happens in Sparwood or what happens in Cranbrook or what happens in Stewart. The reality is if we're seeing tax rates across the province and municipalities go up all of them, there's a reason. And probably we're being impacted by some of those same reasons. And if they're going down, then we should be asking the same question of ourselves. If everybody else is reducing costs, how come we haven't had that same opportunity?
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely valid. And I think Mr. Burdett actually touched on it earlier. One of the items being cost of insurance. Some cost drivers will be shared by all municipalities, and they will, make their best efforts, as you have just done, to find alternate sources for purchasing insurance, for example. But certain cost drivers will be shared by municipalities. So that, I think that's a very valid statement, that some of those cost drivers will affect every municipality in the province. Yeah. Councilor Ravenous?
Just to be a devil's advocate to the devil's advocate here, your worship, while I kind of see where Councillor McIsaac is coming from, but at the end of the day, the taxpayers are still facing the same CPIs as everyone else. So whether it is below, well, if the delta, the taxes have gone up beyond above what they are facing at a grocery store or wherever, it really hurts them. So all I'm saying is there's no right or wrong answer, but at the end of the day, the taxpayers bear the burden. So we got to be cognizant of that. That is one thing. And another thing is, while I understand, certain municipalities like ours in a unique geographical location face different type of cost structure compared to another municipality, and we may not be able to do apples to apple comparison. On the other hand, we start from a different base. So if there is a 5% increase here versus a 5% increase at a lower base, at the end of the day, really, it is going to be more dollars coming out of the taxpayer's pocket. So again, we got to be cognizant of that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not saying there's a right or a wrong answer, but all I'm trying to say is the base effect matters. The base, like what you paid the year before to what you are paying
Yeah, no,
today,
I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's reflected, of course, in our strategic plan that we are cognizant that most of our revenue comes from our taxpayers and Mr. Burdett?
Thank you. The other point I would like to make was the comparison to CPI also is not, while it certainly serves as a general trend, comparing it to the percentage itself isn't particularly useful because CPI doesn't have a municipal bucket of goods. So, our goods that we purchase are usually like building materials and things like that, which I think have gone up quite a bit more than CPI. So I'm sure you're right. We probably are above CPI the last 4 years, but that would be why. And so after council makes their decision and a budget bylaw is adopted, the next step in the budget process is the tax rate bylaw. City is only allowed to collect the amount of money that council has authorized the city to collect. That's the only relevant number when it comes to property tax, the dollar value of taxation revenue. Assessment value does not matter. Our tax revenue does not go up or down with assessment values on top of the increase the council has approved. Assessment values are only used to help us set what the tax rate for each property is in order for us to collect the total revenue number that council has approved. I've tried to put some recent historical math behind this on this slide to help with understanding. Recently, in the last 5 years, except maybe for this year, as you know, Fernie's assessment values have been skyrocketing, 20%, some years 30%. This year, the city's average is an increase of just 2%. Council, however, has been approving a tax increase between 5 and 6.8% in the last 4 years. Because of this difference in assessment increases versus council approved tax increases, the property tax rate in Fernie has actually dropped quite significantly in the last 5 years. In 2018, before the assessment boom, tax rate was $3.86 per $1,000 of assessed value. The most recent in 2024, it was $3.13. That's a drop of 19% in tax rate. Lastly, the effect of a 6.8 tax increase on the average single-family home in Fernie would be about $192 for the year, or $16 a month. Did you want to pause for Councilor McIsaac, or?
Yeah, I think that's probably wise. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Burdett. Please continue.
Okay, thank you. This slide explains that math in a different way. For simplicity, pretend in 2024, you had a house assessed at $100,000 and the city needs to collect $500 worth of property tax. That would make your tax rate $5 per thousand of assessed value. Now, in 2025, council approves a tax increase of 6.8%, but your assessed value also went up by the city average of 2%. So now your house is assessed at $102,000. So I'm going to have to pay 2% more tax and then 6.8% more tax. But actually, no, that's not true. You only have to pay the 6.8% additional tax. In this case, we would adjust the tax rate up to 5.2328 per $1,000 of assessed value, or sorry, 5.2353. The tax rate in this example increased by only 4.7% to ensure we only collect the additional 6.8%. So as I said, this year's assessments have only gone up by 2% on average in Fernie, which means if council approves a 6.8% tax increase, the mill rate would actually have to increase so that we only collect the extra 6.8. And now on to the 10 financial plan guidelines as approved by council, the first of which is the council strategic plan. The strategic plan provides the top level of direction on vision, mission, and values, and the objectives and goals council wishes to prioritize. The senior leadership team was able to use as part of this year's budget prep these council objectives, goals, and strategies as a lens through which we reviewed the proposed operating and capital plans. Also, fairly recently, council has been receiving quarterly updates on these projects and implementation of their strategic plan. So we will continue that practice. Guideline 2 used inflation as a measure. Inflation is trending down, not as high as the last couple of years, but still higher than 5 years ago. Annual inflation without food is 3.1%. Last year, it was 3.4%. The year before, it was 6.9%. The effects of it are still very much being felt, especially as we negotiate our contract agreements with employees. But at least the inflation rate still appears to be slowing. I'll note that, I already touched on this, but this is my point about specific inflation bucket for municipal services. Worth noting, we have 2 separate collective bargaining agreements. One of them expired in December 2023. The other expired in February 24. We also have an exempt compensation policy, which has been in place now for a couple of years. That policy was the result of an independent research study done where they selected 20 sample municipalities and developed steps and bands for the exempt team. Before that, there was no structure for exempt compensation. One of the goals of this policy was to identify the median salary level for each position and then slowly move the positions that were below closer to the median targets.
Councilor Ramadas?
Thank you, Your Worship. CFO, with the exempt is staff, right? Non-union staff, correct? Yeah. With the non-union staff compensation policy that we passed, what was the effect of that in 2024? Like we passed it in 23 end, I believe, right? Yeah, 24, like, is there a slide somewhere that shows what that impact was? How much percentage points or millions of or thousands of dollars that it impacted to?
That's a good question. There is a slide that has our, that looks at our total salary increase and has that total number. And the exempt portion of that number is about 25%, which is roughly how many exempt staff we have compared to our total. So it's in line with percentage of staff to percentage of dollar increase. So when you see that slide later, just keep the 25% in mind. Yeah. Guideline 3 is service levels. Oh, there it is. Salaries up. The financial plan was developed based on existing service levels. A big chunk of the 6.8 tax increase is related to how we used the remainder of the COVID relief funds in 2024. Council will remember that costs at the pool were increasing due to it transitioning to being open 7 days a week for the first time since COVID. Council elected to apply the almost $297,000 to offset those costs, but then did not reduce the tax rate, taking that extra money and putting it into reserves. So that $297,000 is not there anymore, but the money to reserves is still being presented in this budget package, and that equates in itself to about a 3.15% tax increase. The remaining 3.65% of the 6.8 is because of these major categories listed on the screen. Salaries is up just over 527,000, which is a result of what I touched on earlier in the inflation slides. I do have another slide where I go into this number in more depth. I think you know, this number is still an estimate, but I think it's fairly reasonable based on the trend of agreements that we're seeing being ratified across the province.
Sorry, Councillor Audrey Kelly, did you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, your worship. I just wanted to make sure I understood you properly, CFO. The salaries up figure is everyone, not just a particular group of staff, but all staff, including exempt and unionized.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Every single person.
Mhm.
And council.
Thank you.
Again, I have another slide with our large expense buckets later. There are no new positions included in this slide. Of this 527,000, again, about a quarter is related to exempt staff compensation policy. Again, it also relates to about a quarter of our full-time workforce. Benefits are up, but our benefit rate is actually down. So the increase here isn't as big as it could be. Our benefit rate this year is about 29%. Last year it was 30%. So there's some, it's not insignificant savings there. Computer licensing and support is up. Part of this is the additional fee for the new permit tracking software. Another part of it is we used to have our site docs subscription in our safety department. We've just moved that into the asset management department. So sorry, that's not an increase, but it does look like an increase for the asset management department. The rest is just regular fee increases for all of our computer licensing, from software to SCADA and you name it. Insurance dropped again. And I've already talked about this, but there are more providers willing to insure municipalities out there this year. Non-market change, which we have another slide on later, is up about $134,000. This is the amount of new taxation revenue related to new construction in Fernie throughout the year. The mine tax sharing agreement increased by 3.1%, or the BC CPI without food, equating to revenue of about $106,000. And then all of the other categories like utilities, maintenance, etc., all equal to a small increase of $21,500, which is actually quite small to finish off this list. To close out guideline 3, there was one service level of note, which is patching our roads. Patching costs have almost doubled since the onset of COVID. The budget that's presented tonight maintains the same dollar amount, which is about $60,000 for patching that the previous budget did. Staff did want to highlight this area for council to think about or discuss, as the amount of patching we can actually do with that $60,000 is far less than what we used to be able to do, about half. And so if we want to maintain our patching level year to year, we will need to increase the budget by $60,000, which would equate to about 0.64% tax increase. So,
sorry, Councillor Reminis?
Thanks, Your Worship. CFO, I have a question kind of related to this. On page 2, when I'm looking at streets, for example, streets and sidewalks on page 2. Streets, we actually had budgeted about $600,000 and we spent only $493,000. And here we are saying that we need to be increasing more. When we have not spent what we already budgeted, why should we be adding more?
that is a great question. And I meant to address this at the start of the presentation, but the title of the actuals column is estimated, but there's a lot of year-end entries that we haven't done yet because it's still late January. And I realize that's a kind of a frustrating explanation for council every year. Unfortunately, there's no other good way to do it. And yeah, so if it was a service area that was looking to be quite a bit under without all the year-end allocation entries and things like that, then I would let you know. So it is a good question, and you'll see a lot of that in your binder. And as we get further into year end and maybe we do reprints of the binder because things have changed, it might start to appear more reasonable there, but that's the answer.
Yeah, and just for clarity, you didn't say we need to spend more money here. You said we budgeted the same amount of money. It's up to council whether we spend more money on patching streets.
That's right. Yeah.
Thank you.
And the 60,000 that was in last year's budget was all spent for sure for patching. Yeah.
Thank you. Councilor McKenzie.
Thank you, Worship. Knowing that roads get exponentially more expensive to repair when we stop repairing them well, I'm wondering, are we gonna cover more of this at some of the upcoming budget meetings with regards to what that road budget should be and what the implications are of not increasing the budget? Is that gonna happen? Should that happen now, this question, or is it a future meeting? Oh, hit the guy right there.
If I may, through to council. So we do have the pavement condition assessment from last year, which is a pretty good guidebook of where our efforts are best placed. Part of the early budget approval was the update to the IICP, which now incorporates that pavement condition assessment. And what we'd like to do, not this budget year, but next budget year, is have like a comprehensive patching program that aligns with the IICP. So we're not doing extensive patching over top of roads. We're planning on
Mhm.
rehabilitating in the next 5 years, or there's bad utilities underneath that we're going to end up dealing with at some point. So we won't have like that comprehensive plan right now. I did talk to Mr. Burdette about, I started in 2016, and the chunk of the streets program, that the 60 grand for just like general patching, it's always been 60 grand since 2016, and costs have just like gotten out of hand. So that's effectively doing less and less every year. So we just wanted to make sure it was a note for council to consider.
Thank you. No, we'll have we can create a specific envelope for that conversation, roads and sidewalks. And thank you.
Yeah, my first thought is the February 12th meeting would be a good meeting to discuss this in more detail.
Perfect.
And then for sure at the 25th, staff is going to ask what council wants to do about this. But the 6.8 in front of you right now does not have this increase in there, just
Right.
for extra clarity. Guideline 4, staffing in this year's budget is based on existing service levels. Departments did have the opportunity to do business cases for new staff. The leadership team reviewed these cases and are advancing only one for council's consideration, which is the reintroduction of a GIS co-op student, which amounts to about $20,000. The city historically did employ a GIS co-op student before COVID, which was paused during COVID, resulting in a backlog of routine GIS data. This backlog affects the reliability of data that's available to our internal users like planning and engineering. Staff are working on a more detailed capacity and staffing plan to provide a roadmap later this year or early next year, which will specifically highlight existing staffing gaps in advancing certain areas of council's strategic plan. So that GIS co-op student will be another area to revisit on the 12th, but happy to pause now and see if council has any questions about that.
Just from my perspective, just curious how long that co-op term would be typically.
I think it's 4 months, but we'll confirm and
Okay.
get back with Director Jansen.
Thank you.
Guideline 5 is about efficiencies and cost containment, and the next few slides detail some obvious savings we've been able to achieve. Retention is a big one, leads to increased efficiency with people who have been in their positions for more than a year or two. Again, I used myself as an example last year, but again, this year, it's my 4th time preparing budget. And again, I was able to do it this year with no overtime. But 2 years ago, I had 54.5 hours of overtime in the month of January. And we're seeing drops like this with multiple positions. And so as a result, admin overtime alone is down $27,000 this year.
Thank you. Councilor Ramanas.
Thanks, Your Worship. Great to hear that, CFO. You're a smart guy. That's a problem too. What if you move out to some other role, and have you trained your folks to be half as good as you?
That's a great question. And I have a really amazing team. And I'm sure everyone behind me is nodding right now to confirm that. But so I have full faith in them. Should something happen to me? Yeah. We have also designed and implemented a streamlined orientation and onboarding process, helping with retention of new hires. The new-ish Culture Committee has suggestion boxes and conducted culture surveys, providing employees with engagement opportunities, helping with employee empowerment, retention, and employee satisfaction. There's been 4 new HR policies in 2024, directly advancing council's goal of organizational excellence. These help invest in employee development in a standardized and equitable approach. Cloud permit will be introduced for the 2025 building season, which will make that process more efficient. We've implemented an interdepartmental project charter, increasing collaboration and accurate project planning. Also helps us have our capacity discussions before projects even start. There's an internal snow committee which gathers feedback and insight from experienced operators to help improve efficiencies. Procurement still getting better. Year 2 budget amendments continue to work well, allowing us to purchase bigger items earlier in the year and secure the best prices. Again, insurance is down. I touched on this previously, but our benefit rate has dropped again, thanks to the great work we're advancing with safety. The engineering time is spending more time to advance getting projects shovel ready, which was a lesson learned from the annex paving project a couple of years ago. We do our design a year early to help us get RFPs out the door well in advance and to help secure better prices. It also helps with applying for grants for these projects. And the point I want to make on this last item, a couple of council meetings ago, when council elected to support the application of a grant for water meters, a comment was made that this doesn't feel great because it feels like we're just chasing flash sales. And that's exactly right. It doesn't feel great to staff either. But that is unfortunately one of our only options when trying to secure money outside of Fernie taxpayers. In the recap slides I mentioned earlier, our infrastructure deficit being upwards of likely 200 to 300 million. We will not bridge that gap with taxation increases alone or cost containment. We need grants to help us with our major projects. Staff identified this years ago, and that these grants tend to reward more projects that are shovel ready. And a lot of the work we're advancing in all of our capital plans is getting those projects shovel ready purely so that when a grant becomes available, we're ready to enable again to apply for it. But again, staff agrees with council that chasing flash sales doesn't feel great, but it's how municipal funding currently works.
Councilor Ramirez?
Thanks, Your Worship. If you could go back one slide, CFO, like, I really, I'm pleased to see that, the procurement process has gotten better this year. Just for the sake of audience here and citizens, can you give us, 1 or 2 examples of how that has progressed just for the procurement piece?
Yeah.
Through to council, I think the biggest example is I'll pick on 2. The reservoir, if you remember, we had the overbid, we got year 2 early budget approval, and then went back out and ended up securing it for, 1.6 instead of 2.2, I think was the previous year cost. Also the streets program, we're designing 1 year ahead. And then when we get the early budget approval, we're putting that tender out like now for competitive bidding, and we're seeing more competitive bidding in those evaluations. Another example is like the 40,000 IICP update. That was this year's project. I'm not making any promises, but I'm told that the engineering team tomorrow is actually looking at an early final draft. So that'll have the pavement condition assessment and the stormwater model in it for us to look at, in a month. And pre to the summer, where we can look at where we're going to patch and stuff like that and look at our next year's program. So from my world, it really does make an impact rather than trying to do that all between May and the end of the year.
Yeah. Further?
Thank you, Worship. To be clear, you are the biggest spender, correct?
You might have to check the math on that, but I'm probably up there, yeah.
Mr. Barnowski?
You want to do? I also wanted to remind council of the fire truck. Really early design, collaborative design, working with the canoe procurement partnership that's province-wide. Really great vendors, locking in a price for what is an atrociously expensive apparatus, but locking in a really good price comparatively for the municipality far in advance. It pays to be able to design, be prepared, and lock those in early.
Councillor Adi Kelly?
I just wanted to say thank you because I was just going to ask, what about the fire truck? Because that was like a win-win. That was great. Just just so the public understands too. There's a shelf life on fire trucks, period, that we do not control. So being able to get the fire truck the way we did was really good.
I'm curious, as you talk about engineering developing, and I sort of referencing this flash sales idea, engineering developing some shovel-ready projects. I wonder if we could, is that something we could potentially include in our quarterly update? What the current shovel-ready projects are, so that when a grant appears, it's not a surprise. It's like, oh yeah, we were aware that's on the books. Is that a possibility?
I see all the directors writing notes. I'm sure that's a possibility. Just for reference, right now we have the 10th Ave and Riverside lift stations and the CNL right of way, which we all know are critical points to be renewed to enable sustainable service delivery and future growth. And those are all right there right now. And the Ferry Creek UV filtration. So we're in the design phase and updating final designs on all of those so that we're ready and are actively applying for grants that close in a month-ish time, specifically for those projects already.
Thank you. Councillor Ramdas?
That was a terrific point, Your Worship. That's what we should be looking at, having a portfolio of projects that are shovel-ready. And again, another aspect, and I don't want to belabor this point, but another aspect is if you just pre-plan everything well in advance, there is less chances of breaking in the future. Not just being able to communicate to the council when these shovel-ready projects are available to go into a grant situation, but also in terms of you're ready with all the plans well ahead, right? So in case there is any kind of unknowns that occur as you're progressing through the project, you're capable of figuring out what your plan B is. Yeah.
Councillor Nixon and Councillor Adi Kelly?
Yeah, and thank you, Worship. And just to add into the fire truck discussion, it was also great that we had the reserves to pay for it. Because if we didn't have the reserves, where would we be right now?
Yeah, that's fair. Councillor Adi Kelly?
Thanks, Your Worship. This is kind of budget, but kind of not. Speaking of grants, it's a burden on staff it puts extra workload on them and then also takes them away from other work. But is there really a way to centralize that CAO? Because it seems to me that some would be expertise specific. So you couldn't just have like a person that does all your grant writing because they wouldn't have the knowledge, say, I'm thinking of Engineer Line with her knowledge about engineering to procure those grants. Like, would that be a thing?
Certainly larger municipalities have grant writers or grant writing teams who are embedded in their engineering and capital project delivery frameworks. Usually, we don't, many small municipalities don't, but we do compete for the same grants with the likes of Kelowna, who have numerous people whose job it is to just develop relationships with granting authorities and apply for grants. So there's opportunity there, and it is something we discuss. How do we dedicate some specific resources to get people specifically trained up on how to optimize our applications? And we have tried a variety of approaches. We've tried working with consultants who provide grant development, design, application writing, and management services. And if I'm being honest, I've found that our internal staff generally outperform when we spend more with an outside consultant, we don't get the same results as with our internal staff. But we don't have dedicated grant writing capacity. However, I would note there's one exception there. And when council worked with us as staff and we adjusted the staffing layout of our fire department, we brought in a deputy chief. That deputy chief, as part of their standard job description, is to apply and secure grants. And they secure grant after grant after grant that supports the fire service in this community, including more grants just this month that I'm looking forward to being allowed to announce in the future. And that's a really good example of where you've got someone who's a subject matter expert with deep expertise in their field who has dedicated capacity in their day-to-day to go after that kind of funding.
Thank you, Mr. Barnowski. Oh, Councilor Ramirez.
Is it too early to talk about fire, Your Worship?
I would look to Mr. Burdett.
There's a slide on fire. later,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
And then some examples of projects that we are working on that will help with future efficiencies. One project that's on the plan for 2025 is a winter sand shelter. With the continuing warmer climate, our sand often gets rained on and then freezes, and then operators have to spend an hour every day digging it out. This happens very frequently, believe it or not. We also lose product when it melts by being rained on. Last year, a capital project was the business optimization project. This was essentially an audit of how we use our main ERP system, which is called VADM. They provided over 100 recommendations to us, which we are now working through and implementing, which saves everyone time at the city. Digital time cards, very close to kicking off. This will save days every 2-week payroll cycle, having electronic timesheets in 2025. And so that's it for efficiencies, though it remains a key focus of everything we do moving forward. Guideline 6 was around our community funding, by which I mean organizations like the library, museum, art station, Chamber of Commerce, Senior Center, municipally significant events, and other organizations. Your binders mostly have funding levels remaining the same as per this guideline, with the exception of a 6% increase for the library. Staff are also advancing new agreements with our main community partners, which include a process around how asks from various community groups are presented to council. Guideline 7, which is on reserves, are in the budget again as holding steady. And we will review the health of each reserve in detail next week on the 4th. But it's important to note that this year is the last year of our large $600,000 annual payment to pay off the operations facility, which is worth celebrating. And so years 2 through 5 of this budget will reflect that money going back into other reserves, as our contributions to reserves are still lower than the recommended amount that came in the asset management investment plan. There's also a couple of bullets there about the previously discussed $297,000 from the COVID funds, as that amount affects reserves directly and is included in reserves in this year's proposed budget.
Councilor McIsaac.
Looking at reserves, we're taking about $8.3 million out of reserves this year and planning on putting 3.7 in, which is almost a $5 million difference. I'm just wondering, like at this rate, how many more years can we go before we don't have any reserves and we're just unable to do anything?
That's a good question. I might save that for Tuesday when we talk about capital and reserves. Sure. That's okay. It definitely is a very high spending capital year. A lot of it, again, is advancing those really key projects, getting them shovel ready, but we will certainly get into more detail on that on Tuesday.
I'd like to, because I feel like this has been an ongoing pattern for a long time, and I don't know how we reverse it. I know that eventually we'll get reversed on its own because we just won't have any more money. So I'm just wondering, I'm hoping during the reserve discussion that we can strategize how to not wait till it's dead before we try to revive it. Thank you.
I think a key answer to that question will be the work we're doing around gathering more data with our assets that we don't quite have that much data on. And it's going to help us map out those things 20, 30 years in the future better.
Councillor Evans?
Thanks, Your Worship. Can I just go back to our partner organizations in the previous slide?
Yep.
Oh, yeah, okay. So this is kind of connecting back to what Councillor Audia Kelly raised a couple of meetings ago in terms of how much funding we provide to partner organizations in municipality. Like just off the top of your head, CAO, can you give us a sense of how much we spend in Fernie versus other munis that you can think of? Or is this a greater proportion of spending or same?
There are areas where the balance is really significantly different in how those services are funded, whether it's funded through a joint partnership with an RD and the city or directly from the city. I can't give you a useful answer right now, but what I can do is between now and the drill down meeting, it's not quite a capital answer. Our next meeting's capital, but at the drill down meeting, work to bring you some information on what do our resort municipality comparators spend from direct taxation on extended services through community partners and otherwise. What might the RDs provide? And then what other sources of funding maybe exist? Does that help? I'll try and bring some of that to the 12th for you. Thank you.
Yeah, and just anecdotally, I don't know how useful this is, but I had a conversation with a couple who are new to the community. I had a conversation with them this morning, actually, who can't believe the level of services provided in this community for a community of its size. They were quite taken aback, and that's why they moved here. So.
Thank you. I believe I've covered this slide. Guidelines 8 and 10 are a little shorter. 9's on the next slide, but guideline 8 is debt, which again will probably remain at the same level in 2025. It's possible, depending on the timing of a fire hall referendum, that we may incur additional debt in 2025, but I'm expecting we won't actually get the money and incur the debt until 2026. If it does end up being 2025, we will, of course, amend the budget accordingly. Guideline 10 is details our non-market change and also the mine tax sharing agreement. NMC, non-market change, is the amount of new construction in the air, therefore new tax revenue. This year amounts to approximately 134,000. And as it has been used in prior years, that amount has gone directly towards balancing this year's budget. So same level of reserve contributions and offsetting cost increases.
Councillor Ramirez?
Thanks, Your Worship. This is kind of a broad question, CAO, like for NMC. What tools do we have at the local government level to see a drastic increase in NMCs?
In terms of seeing net new units built within the community?
Exactly.
Well, presently we're directly involved with what I would assume is probably the busiest developer in the Elk Valley, which would be the Elk Valley Family Society, developing non-market housing, or at least affordable housing and a mix of market housing. So having a direct hand in development in that way is a surefire way of advancing it. In other communities, there are bonusing programs for increased density in exchange for things like a certain amount of affordable housing, and there are incentives that can be used when there is interest in building beyond current zoning densities. Fernie's a bit unique in that there's a ton of interest in building mountain chalets and single family housing, and a little less in building and looking for density bonusing to accelerate projects. Certainly our work with planning in accelerating our permitting process is one piece of it. However, some of the busiest markets in Canada have permitting and building permit times that are exponentially longer than Fernie's, although I know the local community probably doesn't want to hear that, and my goal is to make ours faster. That's only one small piece of it. A lot of it is, what does the market want to bear, and what do people want to build, and what does your local development community want to build? I think external investors coming to Fernie will be healthy in terms of one, if your goal is wanting to see NMC and net new development come online.
Yeah, and one of the things we did, of course, was in response to the province was pretty much change our zoning across the entire community in terms of the opportunity for density. We just haven't seen the uptake just yet. Councillor Audie Kelly?
Thanks, Your Worship. CAO, I just wanted to ask about development cost charges. I know that that's something that we were looking at. We have to update that bylaw, right? It's significantly old. Is it? I'm just wondering where it's at in our work plans. Like, is it in future? Like, do we have it sort of scheduled?
Oh. It is in this year's budget. We've had some internal discussions about how do we accelerate that, because it's a major undertaking alongside an OCP, and I need to bring you back a little bit more detail. It is a major undertaking, and currently, if we look at the federal landscape, there is an election coming, and one of the candidates who's likely to be coming forward federally is likely to put a lot of pressure on the other side of the DCC discussion on looking at how DCCs and any additional fees on development increase the cost to build and not decrease it. And it's true, it increases the fees to a municipality. It's also true that we need more than just DCCs to build out the infrastructure to support new development. So there's a bit of a balance there, but it's an active discussion we're having, and it is on the work plan.
Councillor Ramadas?
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm just curious, CAO, you said density rewards, like, is that the right term?
Density
you-
bonusing.
Density bonusing, okay. Can you please explain what that is?
Yes, certainly. You'll see in areas where people are trying to build beyond a zone's density. Some communities have density bonusing programs where are you going to build, are 20% of your units going to be affordable housing for the next 20 years? In that case, you get a density bonus of X and you can build beyond the maximum density of your lot, whether through additional height and variances or through the smaller size of units or increased lot coverage. Are you going to be building community amenity space, such as meeting rooms, pickleball courts, et cetera, on your grounds that'll be open to the public? Well, in that case, you can build X number of more units beyond the maximum density. In Fernie, we don't typically see developers looking at the maximum density and saying, I want more. We just don't have that pressure here or that interest here locally yet, although I think we're getting there.
I'll take one more question, then we'll take a bit of a break. Councillor McIsaac, you had your hands up?
Yes, I'll be brief, Your Worship. I just want to mention in regards to Councillor Ramadas's question that last year at UBCM, I took in a couple of sessions. I'm not sure if anybody else was present, and there was quite a bit of discussion about density bonusing happening where councils were encouraging them, if you add affordable housing, we'll let you build another floor on top of your apartment building kind of thing. But in general, they were mostly dismayed with how little take up there was. Which is, right. They like they were providing the offer, but a lot of developers weren't really going after. They knew what they wanted to build, and they didn't want to build more, and they weren't willing to trade in order to put affordable housing in or whatever. Now that wasn't across the board, but that was sort of the general gist of the conversation.
Yeah. Do you have a comment to that, Councillor Ramadas?
Yes, I do, Your Worship. I'm just curious, like I am kind of struck like why SSMUH has not been like a rollicking success that I thought it would be. Any thoughts, Your Worship? Do you?
Well, I think I'm no expert in this subject, but I think part of it is time. People haven't yet seen the opportunity from a development point of view in terms of adding those units. I think once people sort of realize the opportunity, it'll catch fire. I don't know if it'll catch fire in Fernie ever, simply because, as Mr. Bornowski has indicated, we typically build single family homes here. So, as he's also indicated, except for sort of one project that's kind of come and gone and come again, it's housing societies that are building the sort of the density in our community. Yeah. Oh, Mr. Burdett, sorry.
Thank you. I just wanted to make the point, and I apologize if somebody already did, that new development, while it brings in more revenue, also comes with new infrastructure that we need to maintain in place.
Yeah.
So.
One final thought.
Yeah, yeah.
Shut up. I don't know, like, is there opportunity to think deeply and outside the box or whatever, some kind of idea generation with developer communities, or has the staff thought about how to market this better? I don't know. Like, is there some kind of a last mile sort of a problem there? We have done everything that we have on the zoning side and got this SSMUH operationalized.
Mhm.
Maybe that final bit where the developers see actually the incentives in doing it. Is there barriers that we haven't overcome? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can't speak to that. I don't know if anyone has a comment from staff.
I think at present, realistically, the age of some of our bylaws and the quality of some of our processes are barriers, right?
Yeah.
We've just updated our subdivision servicing bylaw. We've just updated the zoning bylaw. We're bringing the building bylaw forward. We're updating our permitting. Those are really huge milestones. And when builders come from outside and they see standards that we've adopted and modern contemporary processes that we're adopting, I think that will help. Separately, development and investment attraction and retention is an economic development function that some municipalities or some regional districts choose to invest in. We had been advancing an EVI partnership with a number of other municipalities, looking to develop a regional bylaw to fund that position to do work specifically on files like that. How do we bring people in to secure investment? It unfortunately fizzled or is fizzling presently at the collaborative table with not everybody moving forward, but there are discussions to be had if council wants to focus on development or developer and investment recruitment or attraction. There are certainly models out there where municipalities try to do that.
Thank you. Should we take a 10-minute recess? Okay, we'll do that. Thank you. Right? Okay, folks, let's reconvene, please. Thank you. Welcome back. Before we let Mr. Burdett continue, were there any other discussion items where we left off? Somebody? Councilor Kelly?
I just wanted to ask you a little bit about the long-term debt. We're retiring the one, yay, feels good. But the trend of interest rates seems to be in our favor. So I kind of wanted to ask you about that. And I know you've given us figures before. So at current borrowing rates, the cost should be reduced then, right? Hopefully it stays that way, trends down.
Thanks, Councillor Kelly. Yeah, you're exactly right. It looks like if we use the fire hall, for example, the last time I opened this sheet, the interest rate was 3.4, but that seems low. But if, you know, I didn't look at what MFA's long-term rate is, but let's say it's 3.15 or something, then that would be a 7.74% tax increase for the average home if we were to fund that loan payment solely through taxation. And I think, I can't remember what I used to say in the meetings when it was up to 4.6, but it was definitely quite a bit more than that.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, probably 10 something for sure.
Okay, Mr. Burdett. Thank you.
Thank you. So then just to finish this slide on guidelines 8 and 10, NMC increase about 134,000, and then the mine tax sharing agreement, it's up 3.1%, which I don't have it on this slide, but I believe is around 106,000. I have it on another slide. And as council is aware, municipal budgeting is a bit of a balancing act between collecting taxes for things now versus saving for the future to reduce the burden on future taxpayers. That's why reserves exist. That's also why new revenue such as this can be used by council to either balance our budget now, reducing the immediate impact on taxpayers, or can be used to increase contributions to reserves a bit. And then the last guideline is number 9. It's public consultation. States that all budget meetings were advertised and open to the public. There's an additional opportunity for engagement this year, which I mentioned before, the business banter budget at the chamber on February 10th, 5:30. And then again, we have our normal public budget open house here on the 19th at 6:30 p.m. So now that we've gone through our budget guidelines in detail, what are some significant opportunities facing the city or available to the city of Fernie this year? Again, that large annual debt payment is almost complete. Interest rates are still reasonably high, but also our cash management processes are much stronger than they were before changes in the finance department, which allows for higher investment returns, which really helps reduce the current burden on the current taxpayer.
Councilor Ramirez, sorry.
Thanks, Your Worship. Kudos, CFO. I know you do that as a hobby on the side of the desk. What's the impact? Like how much, like if we didn't have the new policy, what would have been the revenue, or sorry, what would have been the interest earnings versus what it is now?
Thanks, Councilor Ramirez. Obviously I can't claim all of the credit because the higher interest rates do help a lot. But you know, this year we're budgeting for about 450,000. 4 years ago, it was about 50,000. So, you know, that's a 4% help. It's also kind of a risk because as interest rates keep dropping, you know, we will earn less, even though our cash management processes are better. But I'm confident this year we can kind of maintain the same level that we have the last couple. I talked about this
Further, sorry.
Oh,
Thank you, Your Worship. When you say cash management, you're saying in terms of how you handle receivables, payables, and those kind of things, or is there more to it?
No, I more mean just making sure we're getting the best rate for our money with the investments that we're allowed to make under the community charter. Yeah, just constantly keeping an eye on what products are out there and what might be better for us. And I talked about this a bit when I was talking about flash sales, but staff and council are starting to see national support in terms of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, or FCM, supporting discussions around the municipal growth framework, recognizing that municipalities everywhere, it's not just a Fernie problem, are seeing huge infrastructure deficits and will require funding outside of local taxpayers.
Do we, sorry, Mr. Burdett, do we have a sense whether that lobby effort or advocacy effort has been ubiquitous in terms of the various parties in the approaching election, or has it strictly been focused on the federal government in power? Mr. Pornowski?
I know there's an voiced appreciation for the importance with the current provincial government in power in British Columbia. And I know there's been active engagement and discussion with the current federal party, but I can't say as to whether there's any built-in support with any of the other parties federally.
Thank you.
And lastly, an opportunity is obviously that inflation is still trending downwards. What are some major risks? The Elk Valley mine tax is on this list every year. Could be considered a risk if and when that goes away at current levels, would amount to an immediate 37.9% tax increase to replace it.
Oh, ouch.
Our reserves are low, and while they've been able to fund our smaller capital projects and improvements, they remain insufficient for our larger projects, such as the fire hall. As we all know, we'll have to borrow for that. There's a list here of very expensive major capital projects that are on the city's radar. Many of these staff, as I mentioned earlier, currently spending some time getting shovel ready to apply for whatever grants do get announced at the provincial and federal levels. These projects include the CNL right-of-way, which is the slope above the river near Alpine Trails. That's at risk of failing and currently houses key city water and sewer infrastructure. There's 2 lift stations, which are at end of life. Wastewater treatment upgrades, plan for disassembling the community center. Our groundwater is still being assessed. All of our facilities remain old. Fleet purchases are not getting any cheaper, and so on.
Councillor Ramirez?
Thanks, Your Worship. CFO, can you remind us on the CNL right-of-way, what's our current estimate on what the remediation cost will look like? And is that like a class 5 estimate, or is it closer to class 3?
Thanks, Councillor Ramirez. I believe it's in the budget still for roughly 7 million split between water and sewer, but there is a smaller project in there that's spending time getting those numbers updated and getting that project shovel ready. Director Hausler may want to correct anything I'm saying, but.
Justin Heisler can provide a response.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Shoesmith. I'll give you a moment. He's just locked himself in a dark room. Mr. Heisler.
Through to council, yeah, the cost of roughly 7 million was in 2019 numbers. That part of that project is recosting that based on council's resolution, obviously. But it was a higher, it wasn't a class D. I would have to come back to you maybe on the other date with that exact level of confidence, but I don't have that off the top of my head. I thought B, but.
Councillor Adi Kelly.
Director, I was just looking at some of those minutes from the past, in particular the minutes from 2022 that talked about it. And I feel like I remember there was also going to be the $7 million grant plus 1.8 million coming out of our budget's reserves, which was, I thought, still relevant dollars in 2022 from 2019, but maybe not.
I think the 1.8 8 was when we were applying for that particular grant, which we didn't get, if I'm correct. I think so.
Mhm. I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, further, I thought we were trying to apply for 7 million and then we had to kick in money as well.
Ms. Bornowski?
If I may, we do have information coming on the 4th at the capital meeting. And the only other flag I have is that that's not general taxation. That's water and wastewater reserves that would fund the vast majority of
Right.
our contribution to that should we secure a grant. But we'll have a discussion to make sure we bring back some historical info.
Thank you. Are we done with this topic for the time being? Thank you, Ms. Bornowski. Thanks. Thank you, Counselor. Yeah, would you like to, please do.
Thanks, Mayor Milligan. Just for the record, a large portion of that right of way runs across my father's property, so I can't speak to it really in any capacity.
Thank you for the clarification. Appreciate it. Mr. Burdett.
Thank you. Also, as previously mentioned, we have 2 expired collective bargaining agreements, and current trends in provincial and national contract negotiations suggest higher than normal increases. We're also seeing increasingly complex regulatory requirements that are being pushed down from the province and feds for municipalities to deal with, such as accessibility, water sampling, permit conditions, and permit orders, housing targets, etc. And then the next 20 slides, which will be the end, has some high-level numbers that complement the attachments to the report and your council binders. So this slide breaks out where city revenue comes from. This split here is mostly consistent with prior years, so there's no real change of note to discuss here. Not surprising, over half of our revenue comes from taxation from our local residents, local businesses, and the mines. You can see at the bottom there, our total revenue for 2025 is projected to be 26.6. 2024 was just under 25. This is a little different from the slide at the start because I don't have the reserves pulling out and some other things. Here's a little more detail on revenue. There are a few large increases here, namely new construction of 134,000, which at this time is still an estimate we received from BC Assessment, but it's usually quite close. And also an extra 106,000 from mine sharing. It's worth noting that other than that new construction amount, the property tax amount collected from last year is largely unchanged, as no potential tax increase has been applied to this number yet. Parcel tax revenue, as you can see, decreased by roughly 36,000. And I think Councillor Adia Kelly brought this up earlier. This was the amount we were collecting on the downtown revitalization project from 25 years ago. The loan for that project was paid off at the end of 2024, which is where this revenue was ultimately going. So a loss of revenue, but also a loss of that loan expense. And so now on to expenses. Expenses in general have gone up by 3%, noting that last year they went up by 7%, and the year before that it was 14.7%. This is a listing of our major expense categories. Again, the biggest increase is in salaries and benefits. Salaries mainly due to contractual increases. I do want to spend a little more time with this salary line. If you do the math, you'll see that they're up by 8%. And I want to try to explain this as clearly as I can for council, because 8% obviously feels like a very big increase. The reason for this is that in last year's budget, which we at that time briefly discussed this as well, the timing of the increases was kind of judged unlikely to happen in 2024. And so to me, it felt like a kind of a strange item, taxing residents for an increase that, while eventually will happen, probably won't happen in the year in question. And so what we did last year is, instead of increased salary expense lines, we set aside an amount for contractual increases that was funded by the Financial Operating Stability Reserve. The reason I took this approach is I discussed all of what I just said about the timing of the increases feeling off to me with a few colleagues at other municipalities who had gone through it before. And they suggested the approach that we went with as an option that they generally take when they do their budgets at negotiating time. And so this year, it's likely that the increases will actually, and so I should say the amount that we put aside last year, it didn't happen last year, so that's back in reserves. And so this year, it's likely that the increases will actually come into effect for 2025, but it's really for 2 years now, most of 2024 and 2025. And so there's a mix of funding it with taxation. As you'll see on Tuesday and on page 24 of your binders, there's still an amount funded by the Financial Stability Operating Reserve that is intended to cover any retro costs because of negotiating contracts. The problem is still there, though, that in these salary numbers really still are an estimate. And so if it does end up being later in the year, any extra salary money collected will factor into next year's budget. So I hope that's clear, and certainly willing to have more of a discussion about this if council wishes. Also, the very next slide is about our salary number as a percentage of budget. So if you wanted to bring that up now, it's coming up very soon as well.
Okay.
But I'll pause on salaries and see if there's questions. Okay, and so moving on, you can see utilities up a small amount from 2024 budget, insurance down, nothing else really too anomalous here. And as council knows, there were some emails last week asking for more detail on a couple of specific items. The first was last 5 years showing Fernie's wages, overtime benefits as a percentage of our total operating budget. In the email last week, I said our number was just under 54%, but I was actually including water and sewer salaries in that number too. And when I started to reach out to other municipalities for some comparative numbers, I had to back out water and sewer to have meaningful comparatives with their data. So our operating budget salaries as a percentage of total budget is 49.5%. It's remained fairly consistent with the exception of the last couple of years, which for 2024 was mainly because of the increased days the pool was open again. And for 2025 is a reflection of what I just discussed with the increasing percentages coming from our wage contracts. I did hear back from 3 other municipalities in the Kootenay region. I didn't really get permission to share which municipalities, so I instead used population as a comparative. I'm sure they're fine with it though. They range from 39% to 44.5%. Those numbers obviously lower than ours, but there's a couple of very obvious differences that help explain that gap, such as they all have volunteer fire departments. All of them own significantly fewer buildings and offer fewer services than Fernie, which sometimes means more as their services are requisitioned and provided through their regional districts. But if they had different treatment of any of those items, their numbers would be closer. And we also discussed this earlier, but I just want to caution council against using these numbers as anything other than a reference. The second emailed item last week was contractors and consultants as a percentage of budget. And as I was putting this together, it was clear that it was a bit of a complicated answer, and I'll try to explain why. When I read the question, it kind of read to me like more so around professional services rather than the hiring of contractors, which I tried to list out in the first group of bullets here. And then even when I get into this list of contractors.
Sorry, Mr. Burdett.
Sure.
Councilor Ravenous.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm still stuck in 3 slides behind CFO. Pardon me, like I'm a little slow when it comes to these things. Can you please re-explain that thing you said about salary hike? I couldn't understand it completely.
Sure. So the 2 agreements, for example, expired mostly early 2024. And then there's negotiating those agreements, which at the time didn't seem like it was likely to happen in 2024. And so taxing Fernie residents for a potential tax increase or a potential wage increase when it wasn't likely to even happen until the next year felt off to me. So instead, what we did is we put aside an amount funded from that Financial Stability Operating Reserve, which is there purely for reasons like this. And then it was correctly predicted that our new agreements didn't happen in 2024. So that the amount that we took out of that reserve goes back into the reserve. And now this year, we have to factor in 2024 increases and 2025. So that's where the 8% comes from, which is really just an estimate based on the trends that we're seeing.
And sorry, the retro pay is still coming from the financial stability reserve?
Yep, which I believe I said page 24 of your
Yeah.
binders. You can see
No,
the
you
line
did. I
for
just
that.
wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Yeah.
Further?
Can you remind us which two negotiations again? That's our CBA and another one is,
Yep, there's one QP, which is most of our municipal workers, and then there's the IAFF for the firefighters.
And staff salaries are tied to,
Yeah, exempt staff get a inflationary increase tied to what those two agreements end up being. So exempt staff also haven't had their inflationary increases
Right.
yet.
Councillor Ode Kelly?
And how does it relate to our bands? For example, so there's like a CPI sort of increase, for lack of a better word. And then it's also tied to the contracts, but it's also tied to the bands. Can you kind of help me out with that one?
Sure. The inflationary increase increases all of the bands and all of the levels. And then the levels are set to a target of the median between those 20 comparative municipalities. And anyone below that, barring successful performance reviews, will jump up a level. So that's separate still from the inflationary increase, is how that policy works.
Thank you.
Okay, so then I was talking about this first list of contractors. You know, the top one on that list is recycling and organics, which is done by a contractor, but we also collect separate revenue for that. The other items on this list are mostly very small, certainly less cost than a full-time person, but are contractors. So just the biggest item on this first group of bullets, which is the recycling, organics, and garbage contract, is about 2.3% of our entire budget, or about 460,000. The rest of these contractors add up to another just under 2%. So all of the contractors in total is about 4.3% of our total budget. As for consultants, oh, something happened in my font. And I'm mainly talking about our IT services provider and outside engineering firms. For engineering, we only have a small amount budgeted for occasional help with development reviews and or troubleshooting of our systems like the water main that may require some technical advice on system operations. And that amounts to 0.1% or 0.001 of our total budget, so about $20,000. For IT, we pay, Councillor Ramadas.
Councillor Ramadas?
thanks, Your Worship. How was that so small? Like 0.1% you said. I'm thinking about like, you know, an arcadist, for example, that was used in fire hall. Like that includes those guys too, correct?
Thanks, good question. And I have a point about this earlier, but this is only counting our total operating budget. So
Arcadis would be capital, right?
Yeah, and I'll make that point still as I go here. And then for IT, we pay $189,000 annually for their managed services fee, which includes a very long list of items, about 20 items on that list, but a few examples are hardware service and support, IT infrastructure and performance monitoring, business consulting for policies, procedures, and best practices, asset management for our IT infrastructure, and so on. So 189,000 equates to roughly 0.9% of our total budget. So 1% total on consultants. The rest of the tasks that the engineering firms do, as Councillor Ramadas just touched on, is help us with capital project design and occasional management, though we do manage most of our capital projects ourselves. And those costs are then built into the cost of that capital project themselves. and so therefore don't really take up a percentage of our operating budget. So the 4.3% from contractors plus the 1% from consultants is 5.3% of our total budget. And if you take away the 2.3 from recycling, then it's 3% of our total budget. And so I'd like to just pause here and see if that mostly answers council's question. If you were hoping to see it presented a different way, maybe had specific contractors or consultants in mind. I did try to be as detailed as possible there.
Anything else from council on that? No. Seeing none?
Thank you. This slide covers our legislative services department. The increase is really just attempting to budget better for the annual conferences, given recent post-COVID attendance and costs. The note at the bottom provides a bit of detail on how council stipend works, which is increases every year by the provincial CPI, which was again 3.1%. Admin services, quite a large decrease here, but really because we wanted to split out communications as its own department for some extra visibility. Some small increases offsetting this reduction are mostly revolving around what we've discussed already, namely salary costs and benefits. Asset management, which includes our technology and IT. I discussed this earlier, but the main increase here in this department is the computer licensing and support, which is increased by about 67,000 because of both regular increases in our existing systems and software, but also the new permit tracking software and the site doc subscription, which we transferred out of the safety department. Development services or planning, building, inspection, and bylaw has some increased expenditures this year because of the.
Sorry, Mr. Bird, it just occurs to me, and you don't have to go back any slides. I'm curious about our IT support. Do we occasionally go to market to make sure we're getting the best value? How does that process work?
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. We have a contract with them, and when it expires, then certainly we will have looks at our options.
How long is the contract? I'm just out of curiosity.
It expires in 2026. And Director Jansen is sick tonight, but I can confirm what I'm saying with her and let you know if anything's different.
Thank you.
No.
Not for the people at home. Councillor Adi Kelly.
Sorry.
Backtracking again, Your Worship, but don't go back slides. Can you just remind me, you were talking about some of the things that are expenses, but we also, like, there's collecting for it, which our agreement for fire protection outside of the boundaries, is that 2025 or 2026 that's up?
That one's 25, yeah.
Thanks.
And we've discussed this at prior council meetings, but we're already having discussions with them about that. The planning has some slight increases because there was an extra 0.5 FTE planner, which was in last year's budget, but it started late last year, and it's still grant funded. I forget the name of the grant at the top of my head. And then bylaw has some increased expenses here, but it's mainly due to increased towing costs that we've been doing the last couple of winters, which we then collect increased fine revenue to help offset.
Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Worship. Just a quick question. By increased towing costs, do you mean that the cost of towing a vehicle has gone up, or the fact that we are towing many more vehicles? Or is it both?
Good question. Mostly towing many more, but I'm sure the costs have increased as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. And the fee that we charge for those towed vehicles covers the cost?
That's a good question, Councillor Hamilton. The answer is no. So that's a bylaw that has to be updated, and because we can only charge what's in the bylaw, we can't just charge a variable amount based on what the bill was. Yeah.
And because we're in this area, I'm curious about STR fees in our community. I think it's just a business license, which is $100. I wonder if there's an opportunity to look at a minimum what's being done in the regional district and see if we can't maybe harmonize our fees.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Milligan. Mr. Kramer is almost done with the report coming to an upcoming council meeting.
Yeah, it's come up before, and I'm just curious. It'd be nice to have a hard look at that. Councillor Shoesmith.
Thanks, Mayor Milligan. I'd be happy to see both of those items cross our desk as quickly as possible. I think that we're kind of getting some bad deals there and we should be fixing that up.
Yeah, and kudos to our bylaw officers. They are very much on top of SCR operators and work very well with them. But I think I don't know if it nets out the Granicus contract. I don't know if it's actually a cost for us versus a neutral, because the fees, I don't think, support the enforcement. Mr. Baranowski.
Your worship, we had a good dialogue around that and are bringing it in February. Reason being, business licenses are complete for the year. So a change now can take a little bit of time before they come into effect. We won't be recharging for second business licenses in this cycle, but you're absolutely right. That, along with some dialogue as we continue to move forward around the philosophy internally around should our bylaw enforcement officers be drafting and writing bylaws, be handling the administrative duties, or focus just on enforcement, because we have a very blended model, which is typical of municipalities our size. They handle the full cycle of services. And then some dialogue on do we or do we not look, aside from towing costs, aside from STRs, do we look at business licenses as something that currently is quite inequitable when you look at the costs that different businesses drive from a home-based business through to a big box store, through to a mechanic, but that's a sensitive and important dialogue to have with business owners in the community. So not something to rush into.
No, understood. Thank you. Councillor Ramadas.
Thanks, Your Worship, and I apologize. I'll be less charitable about this. This has come up many times. This was a big topic during the 2022 elections, and many of us have said about this several times at the table. I would like this to accelerate a little bit, be it the SGR, the fees increase, the towing fees increase. I just don't understand why it takes so much time for these things to percolate through to the council. Like, what's the holdback here?
Well, that's a really good question. The holdback is small scale multi-unit housing and having 2 bylaw officers and 1 manager of planning to do that kind of work, and having beyond full plates for them to bring bylaw updates and the analysis across the table, and then having property remediations that take injunctions and take multiple reports to council and working with lawyers. They're tapped. They're not waiting around looking for work to do. But I agree. We have to look at shifting expenses from property taxation to user pay where appropriate. And it's not lost on us. I'm also frustrated that it has taken so long. But I am confident in saying the reason it takes so long is that those crews have been busy with absolute top priority items they've had to do. They've had to do a lot of work in the last year that hasn't allowed them to get back to those fee updates.
And we don't have 2 full-time bylaw officers, right?
That's correct. Both of them are just under full time.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Council. RCMP protective services costs actually fairly flat. There were some big increases in recent years as they negotiated the new contract, but this year's pretty good. I will remind council here that frequently RCMP has staff shortages, and then we do get invoiced less for that, which is how we've historically funded our financial stability operating reserve. But we don't budget for that shortfall.
Councillor Ida Kelly.
That just sparked a question, the 2 combination of things. Would hiring temporary help for those things that we really want to accelerate be something we could pay out of the stability operating reserve?
The short answer is yes. But in terms of how you would do it, I guess it would be notice of motion, or like if you were to do it outside of the budget, or you could ask an amendment to the budget to include projects like that too.
If I can, if it's a question of adding or reprioritizing, addressing fees and charges and penalties and business or STR license review, discussion as we get into capital and major projects next week, and saying, I'd like to see that up. What is the cost to either have that contracted and putting some placeholders in? Then staff can bring back funding solutions, whether that's looking at the stability reserve and how comfortable we are with the commitments it has and why it was created, or sharing what the impact on taxation would be, or a drop or a cancellation of something else.
Mhm. Thank you, Mr. Borowski.
Fire department, main increase here is due to contractual increases in salaries and benefits. Also call out overtime increasing in this budget to better reflect actuals is a reason for change here too.
Councilor Ramana?
Thanks, your worship. I kind of know all the answers, but I'll still ask, like, what can we do here? It's an unsustainable stairway to heaven. Like, what do we do on the fire? Like, is there any opportunities here at all to bring this trajectory down or flatten or something? Like, as a follow-up, say another question I have kind of related to, like, let's take the example of, a year ago, was it a year ago or 2 years ago, we had the assistant chief move from staff position to a staff union position to a staff position. And we thought, that'll have some cost savings opportunity. Like, we did that, but I just don't see any impact of any of these things. It just keeps going up.
If I can, it wasn't for cost savings. It was because he was dedicated to securing grants, and he's definitely secured north of $100,000 to $150,000 of direct funding programs for that department per year since he's moved into that assistant or deputy chief position. So it has had really good results, but that's not free. It did increase expenses having another body shifted over into that management position. I think operational expenses are really hard because a firefighter in Fernie is going to be compensated to the same degree as a firefighter in Vancouver or in Burnaby or anywhere else. That's the nature of the service with career firefighters, and it's a very challenging and very intense career. What I would say is I think there are opportunities, as we spoke, to adjust and address our revenues. And the chief's pilot of wildfire response and being able to generate revenues through firefighters who are now trained and certified as truck bosses to go and do wildfire response and then generate revenues paid back from Wildfire BC or provide wildfire or fire services to the regional district. Negotiating and providing those offer new revenues so that we reduce the cost of the service and the burden of that on the taxpayer. And so I would just call out there's a 430-ish thousand from the regional district that directly supports this. So that number is actually just under $500,000 lower when we look at the revenues from Fire Boss Response and the RD in the last year. So hopefully expanding that this year, we can continue to improve revenues for wildfire response if there are wildfires, which isn't something I'm hoping for, but it's another way, finding new revenue opportunities to support the expense. But short of looking at ways of reducing your complement, you have a fixed number of career firefighters, and that's the vast majority of this. Comparatively, the budget for equipment and services and facilities and everything else is much smaller than other departments once we take out salaries than for volunteer departments. But with salaries, it's a big number because we have professionals in Fernie providing the service.
And our current negotiation with the regional district, does that offer more revenue opportunity here in this bucket? Not to, don't tip your hand in negotiation or anything.
Thanks, Mayor Milligan. I can't really comment on that. There's a formula in the current one that's based on assessment values, which is pretty standard among agreements like this. So unless we find a way to change that, I can't. That's the only comment I can make at this point.
So has it historically escalated based on the assessment in area A then, like because that's gone up significantly, I would think.
Yes, and part of the formula includes our how much our operating costs are, and but the current one has a cap to how much it can go up a year, which that's something I will be looking not to have next time, especially in the last few years, because it's definitely feels like it's transitioned a bit onto the Fernie taxpayers.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Councilor Ramirez?
Thanks, Your Worship. Just a resourcing question, like what's the complement right now? How many full-time, how many auxiliaries do we have? How many do we actually require to just keep the lights on?
Or from burning out.
Thank you, Worship, to Councillor Ramadas. Currently, we have 8 union firefighters. Of that, 2 would be on shift if everything was equal and we didn't have holidays and so on. This past year, 50% of the time we had 2 firefighters on shift, and 50% we had 1. And then we have 2 exempt staff, which is the deputy and the fire chief. And right now we're sitting at 16 auxiliary firefighters. We'd like to be around 25. We just interviewed 6. We're hoping to get 8. Our auxiliary complement is quite green, let's say. We have 5 senior auxiliary firefighters that I'd say were over 3 years experience. It's an interesting community that we have with our fire service, in that it's a very revolving door with tourists that come in that want to be firefighters. We put ads out all the time to have firefighters. It's very hard to get even 8 a year. I've mentioned this before, how we're losing firefighters because of the situation we're in. I'm not really going to get into that right now, but at the end of the day, the firefighters are paid the exact same amount to within 1% of every firefighter in BC that's a career firefighter. What's expected of them is very different in small communities like ours, where they have to know so much as far as rescue, swift water, ice rescue, confined space. Whereas a lot of the city departments, they have specialties. And so, especially if you're green, you handle a hydrant, or you might get to be on the hose one, in a year or 2. But at the end of the day, these guys come in and they've got to, rescue someone from a river that's in a car within, a few years. Our career staff, which operationally would be 1 or 2 firefighters, they got to lead that team that goes in there to do all that stuff. And so at the end of the day, obviously I don't want to slight volunteer fire departments, but our service is exceptional for the community size that we have. And yes, it costs, but I can tell you a community close to here is their operating budget is 900,000 for the career chief and a deputy. We work very hard at making sure that the service is good with very little, as far as equipment and supplies and so on. So we try to do the best with training our career staff to do the in-house training, so that we're not spending $8,000 a year bringing a contractor in to teach something. So we try hard to have each firefighter be specialized in something that they can instruct. So where we're losing in paying our firefighters to be career firefighters, we're gaining in education, training, experience, and an exceptional service, in my opinion. So this has been a subject for the 25 years that I've been a firefighter here. And I can't think of any time that someone came to me and said, man, you guys just aren't doing a good job, right? So it's also the fact that most of our calls are medical. And if we got 1 or 2 firefighters that can get there 1 or 2 or 3 minutes earlier, makes all the difference. And I can't say that for the volunteer fire departments that are in our region. And it's not slighting them at all. They're all doing a great job. It's just, we have an exceptional service, and unfortunately we have to pay for it.
Councillor Kelly.
Chief partly actually answered, but I know, Chief, you have been looking at lots of different options. I know you were talked about in the past, like work experience, but the situation that we're in right now doesn't really lend itself to that going well. And I'm going to imagine that you have to, having a, I don't want to say it in a mean way, but if we do have a revolving door for our auxiliaries, then you're having to train people all the time, which has got to be a drain on your budgets.
It's a constant training session. And so the issue we also have is that, well, no different than any department, we've got junior firefighters that need the basics. We've got senior firefighters that come on Tuesday night that dedicate that time, that want to learn more stuff, but we're stuck here with a lot of people that are having the basics. So to keep those guys inspired to keep going is a challenge. So we've got to split up, ask some career guys to come in to help with those guys, and so on and so on. We're trying our best to, make good with what we've got, sort of thing. So, last year we trained 3 firefighters and engine boss, which that's somebody who can lead a truck to go into deployment for wildfire. We sent 3 firefighters after that training, along with an old rescue truck, to Argenta to help with that fire. It brought the city in $50,000 gross. So net, the city ended up getting $25,000. That doesn't a lot of times get shown in this, but it's those kind of things that we're trying to do to help offset costs, but it often doesn't get seen. A road rescue, we're probably getting around $8,000 from the government a year, and we're not, our costs aren't that much because of how we structured on those kind of calls, bring auxiliaries in, instead of career firefighters, and just having the career firefighters on shift go to those calls, therefore decreasing our costs and not bringing in a lot of career guys on overtime for that. I can tell you the overtime issue is something that both the union and management want to figure out. It's a big expense. This year was, I don't know, I think, Brent, like 80,000. We'd hoped that we could bring it down last year, with the idea of a model where I could just send 4 guys out and just call in a certain amount of people. But the contract with the letter of agreement that happened, a previous contract, it had one line in there that says, any call that's an all call, any other call besides those little calls has to be an all call, which is alarms. And so we're bringing in career firefighters for alarms. And so that's a big expense. We had one at Benito, for example, yesterday. We had to do an all call because it's the kind of facility where we can't take that chance. If it's an alarm and it is a fire, and now we're waiting still for guys to get to the fire hall after we've discovered that it is a fire and we're trying to get people out, then it's a challenge. So the other thing with Fernie is that we're getting more and more like 3, 4, 5-story buildings. With the resources that we've got, I just don't know how we have the capacity to take care of that. But at least we've got an upper echelon of trained career firefighters that can, small, but can guide that. And at the end of the day, hopefully it doesn't happen, but we get the wildfire coming or one of those big buildings going up, and we have to deal with that and make those decisions. So I understand it's a big cost for a small community. But I truly do believe it's worthwhile. And I truly believe the citizens, if it happens to you one day where you need them now, it does make a difference.
Councillor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. Chief, let me tell you, I don't enjoy asking these questions either, right? And we are all grateful for your service here, your team and everyone. Like that's, I understand where you're coming from. Second thing is, I just want to point out the arithmetic here, simple arithmetic.
Yeah.
In my own term here, I've seen this going from $1.5 million to now we're talking about $2 million. It's just constant increase in trajectory. That we just have to be clear-eyed about this, right?
Yeah.
And that's my job as a counselor. I got to be asking these questions. The third thing that I want to ask is, do you truly believe that right now the complement that you have is the bare minimum, and it can only go up from here on and not any lower?
Yes.
If that's the case, are there areas there where you can drop your service level without affecting Fernie residents only?
I think at the end of the day, what we would drop wouldn't be that much difference in cost because it's all wages. Most of it is wages. We have tried to save, like I said, with in-house training for lots of the, the rescue, especially specialties. But yeah, it's the same in every community that has career firefighters. The wages are really, really good. And it's sort of become standard that all firefighters in BC get the same wage. But so, yes, we have 8, but like I said, we only have 1 or 2 that are on shift at a time. Yeah, I am working on with them right now on trying to figure out through bargaining and maybe even taking that letter of agreement out to just bargain on that until we do, but trying to get so that we can try and figure out the overtime, whether it's, time in lieu of or bank time or whatever, something to help offset that cost. So.
Further? Councilor Nixon.
Thank you, Your Worship. The wages are really good, but the risks are also very high. And how do you put a cost on PTSD? How do you put a cost on for those forever chemicals? I just think about my kid and the danger pay that he is he paid for on base is like it's minimal, right? So these are all the I'm gonna get really sad with this, but the wages are good, but the risks are super high. So thank you for continuing service. So anyways, that was poorly said.
Not at all. Councilor Artie Kelly.
I just wanted to ask Chief, because maybe I didn't understand it right, but if we didn't have 8 career firefighters, wouldn't we need way more auxiliaries, like way more, which would mean a constant, even more training money and all those things? Like, isn't there a ratio that we sort of have to have as a safety thing?
So dwelling protection grading, we're at 2. I brought this up before. I've given a presentation on it before, but that 2 is a really, really good number for insurance. With that 2, what you have to have for a 2 is you have to have a career firefighter. You have to have 15 volunteers attend a fire, and you have to have a chief officer attend. And that's the minimum. So for us to keep that grading, that needs to continue. I don't want to tell you what we actually had on the last 4 fires, but it's not quite that number, so, but close. Sorry, way less auxiliaries, but we had career staff that offset the 15 volunteers. So one, for example, we had 4 auxiliaries and 9 career. So and then our exempt staff.
Mr. Borowski, did you have your hand up?
Just that, there are specific staffing levels for that 8 that are enshrined in a contract with the bargaining unit. So it's not a simple decision in the same way it would be if staffing levels weren't enshrined in a contract. And then B, further delving into the labor matter or nuances of that contract is generally an in-camera discussion, and I would be happy to facilitate that with council, but it's more appropriate to talk about identifiable groups of individuals' employment contracts in camera.
Councilor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. Could we have that discussion during this budget cycle itself?
Mr. Bornowski? Yes. Councilor McIsaac.
Just to point out, and I'm sure you already know this, Your Worship, we can choose to go in camera to have a discussion at any time.
Yeah, no, that is true.
If one of the councilors thinks it's very important.
And well, I would.
I'm not encouraging that because it's already going to be late. I'm just
Yeah,
saying the
well,
option's there.
And I think providing people the opportunity to prepare for that discussion is appropriate as well.
That's what I was gonna say. I'd
Yeah.
like a little bit more prep on that.
Yeah. Councilor Ida Kelly.
Yeah, and apologies, Chief did answer, and I apologize, Chief, I did mean the FUS rating thing, because if our rating goes down, our insurance costs go way up,
I don't know the
or
amount.
they'll go up.
They will.
Councilor Shoesmith.
Thanks, Mayor Milligan. Second to collect my thoughts. Just to jog my memory and for the benefit of those listening, when are we renegotiating with the RDK about our coverage for them?
Thanks, Councillor Shoesmith. The agreement expires end of 2025, so we've already been talking to them specifically about the clause for their contribution to the fire hall, but that going this year.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Anything further while we have the chief in the microphone? Thank you, Chief.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Burdett?
Thank you. I've got about 10 slides left, just for everyone's information. Parks and Rec, Council has seen fairly large increases in this department since 2022, due only to facilities opening back up since COVID and offering full service levels again. This year, it's fairly flat and is mainly due to the projected salary and contractual increases.
Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. I'm just curious, I fully appreciate that through COVID, our staffing levels, our costs, everything were down. What is the comparative to just prior to COVID? I don't know if you have that handy or if that can come back at the February 12th meeting, but it would just be, I think it might be useful to see what that looks like.
Sure, that's a good question, Councillor Hamilton. I can bring that back. My only caution, and I don't actually, not sure I really want to get into it, is just the reliability of the numbers prior to 2021. If you'll remember, the reason we had to take the ops facility loan out in the first place. But sure, we can dig into the budget from those years and bring it back. Absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah, and I guess I've realized that there might not be some little accuracy missing from those earlier numbers, but just it'd be good to kind of see, taking the COVID time when the facilities were out of commission, what that looks like.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And I'm curious here, Mr. Burdett, maybe this is something we can drill into, but what is the community center currently costing us, given its idle hulk at the moment? Yeah, and what does that 80,000 entail?
80,000 is mostly insurance and some utility costs for that. And then there's a little bit of staff time still, just, for just regular upkeep, doing the rounds, making sure nobody's sleeping in there and whatever.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry, Councillor Shoesmith.
Thanks, Mayor Milligan. So as I understand it, when somebody pays to use one of our recreational facilities, they're paying a portion of the cost and the rest is subsidized by the Fernie taxpayers. Is that correct?
Yep, we do not make 100% of our costs back on any facility.
Okay. On average, I understand it'll be different from facility to facility and kind of hard to quantify exactly for some of them, but what would that balance be? Is that like a 90-10, 80-20, 50-50?
We collect about 20% on average for most of our facilities.
Okay. yeah, for my part on that, the way I see that is, the city of Fernie taxpayer is, subsidizing everybody that's visiting, which is nice. Although I wonder what that would look like to say tilt that somewhat the other way, not 100 and 0. And, you know, if it's 80-20, maybe 70-30, like what would that look like?
I mean, there's a balance, right? They provide, you know, cheap swimming lessons to your kids, for example. And, you know, I was in there the other day with my kid and I overheard the front desk clerk said $6.25 for an adult to drop in. So if you wanted to increase it to 40%, then all of a sudden that becomes $13.50. And is that too much to go for a swim? You know, it's really up to council's risk tolerance or overall view of it.
Thanks. Just my thinking on it is that, you know, if you're a city of Fernie taxpayer, you're paying that one way or the other. And I certainly enjoy our facilities, particularly the pool. Obviously, you wouldn't want to do it 100 and 0 because that would be a absolutely untenable amount. But say if we tilted it 10% or whatever, you know, if we raised the cost of that from $6.50 to 10 or something like that, like what kind of impact on the budget is that going to have if we were to do that at our facilities?
I mean, just at a high level for Parks and Rec here, for example, it would bring in another 340,000 or 3.5%. And that's always a request council can make to bring back our facilities and user fee bylaw for some modeling and maybe look at fee changes in that bylaw.
Be a discussion I'd be happy to have at a later time or further on in this process.
Councillor Audie Kelly, you had a question?
Yeah, thanks, your worship. You were mentioning CFO 20%. Is that sort of comparable to other communities? Like do rec facilities generally in smaller communities really make back all their costs?
No one ever makes back all their costs on recreational facilities. It's typically, there's a range. I know we're a hockey town. Hockey arenas are the worst in terms of return on investment and cash flow and revenues, followed closely by swimming pools. But you can look at 20 to 30% of your revenues coming from user pay and events and conferences, and the other 70% coming from the ratepayer, typically in municipalities. But that's a very wide typically. And some municipalities have adopted philosophies that set across services an amount that they want to recover, whether that's 100% or 80% for development services, 70 to 100% for cemetery services, 30% for recreation, as a way to target where they're willing to have the ratepayers subsidize user experiences. That generally comes after a large level of service review, which is continuing through our process and is a major project again for the coming year. So I'd like to get there before we're setting them broadly. I'm happy to bring back the user fee bylaw to one of these meetings so that we can talk about what a 10% or a 20% increase might mean and make some guesses about whether that impacts attendance and make some guesses about what that might, or some estimates of whether that impacts attendance. And
Councillor Ravenous?
Thanks, your worship. I'm just want to have a conversation with Councillor Shoesmith there, if you wouldn't mind.
Ask the question.
You're happy to drop a notice of motion on this, and if you want to make this, you know, a potential bylaw, bring it on. I don't know.
Well, we have a bylaw.
Yeah, I just see it as Fernie subsidizing the broader region as well as the visitors, which, well, it overlaps quite heavily with our taxpayers. That's not a one-to-one. And I'm not talking about a radical change. I think that I would like to know what a twiddling of that dial would do for the bottom line tax-wise. I mean, if raising the cost of those amenities by $1 or $3 places, you know, 1% or 2% property tax increase off the table, or you know, out of the discussion, I think that would be great. And I do think to some extent, particularly in the case of visitors and people coming in from other places, I mean, they should be user pay more than less.
Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Worship. I was just thinking how, what an opportunity to run the city more like a business and raise the rates to whatever the market can bear, right? Isn't that how we do it? No, in all seriousness, I would welcome a review of the user fees and so on. I think we should be doing that on a regular basis, frankly, because the amenities that we have in our community are part of the quality of life of the people here, and always keeping an eye to, certainly, I think people will expect certain increases, but we always have to be mindful of the fact that there are people for whom some of these things are difficult to afford already, and increases of fees may actually leave them wanting. Absence of those amenities. But
I
how do
agree.
we decide that without having the discussion and so on? So I would encourage that.
Mr. Birdie, you had your hand up.
Oh, yeah. Mr. Logan just whispered a interesting idea in my ear. That's not super common, but some municipalities have different rates for locals or visitors or people that own a.
Yeah, and I think we had that here at one point, but we stepped away from it. I'm not sure of the background. Yeah. Yeah. Councillor Adi Kelly.
Yeah, I remember us doing that. And actually, when my girls used to play hockey in Cranbrook, we had to pay basically double because we weren't Cranbrook taxpayers. Chief Morgan probably was one of those people paying double like I was. I'm wondering, though, there would be an administrative cost to that.
Yeah, Mr. Logan was just talking about it might be an update to our ActiveNet system to be able to, you know, if we issue cards to people that own a house or something, scan their cards, or you could do it from driver's license, but then, you know, you have an Alberta driver's license, but own a home in Fernie, and, you know, there's some things to iron out for sure.
Councillor Romanus.
Your worship, I'm just thinking more procedurally here, like if we want to kind of action this, at least have a debate at the table to review the bylaw. What's our steps here? Like at least my preference would be to have this conversation and a potential amendment or not an amendment to the bylaw during this budget cycle, and not wait for, you know, X number of months after we have decided on the tax increase.
Is that doable, Mr. Baranowski?
Now, the corporate officer can correct me, but I think understanding you want to drill down of this, we have the drill down meeting scheduled, and we can bring that bylaw and a spreadsheet for council to look at and review. And then council may by resolution direct staff to adjust user fees for X, Y, or Z up or down. Does that, if that's acceptable, I think without a resolution, we have that drill down meeting. If council wishes a overhaul of the bylaw, it's a not insignificant bylaw, then definitely what I would look for is a notice of motion that staff create a special meeting to review the bylaw in writ large.
Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Worship. Again, while I would welcome this coming back, the impact on changing user fees and so on for our various amenities impact a lot of user groups, like the opportunity to have dialogue with them about what the impact would look like and all those things. Like this is, I don't think it's a trivial thing.
No.
And while I appreciate wanting to have as much financial information as possible while we're going through the budget process, I just don't see how realistically we could do a good job of a review of that in the time that we're doing budget.
Councillor Romanus.
Thanks, Your Worship. That's the reason why we should have that debate, right? I mean, the risk tolerance of certain councillors might be different from risk tolerance of certain other councillors. If it means that we take, if some of us have to take a harder stance on this and have to connect with the community groups and have to explain to themselves, the onus is on those councillors to do so. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean, but I wholeheartedly disagree. We have the debate here, but when we go forward, it's us.
Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. Yeah, you know, I've heard it multiple times around this table that we need to be open and transparent. And I think without consulting with all of the user groups, we're not following our own guidelines. To what Councilor McIsaac was saying, you know, we are, as a group, the decision-making body. We need to make those decisions where everybody has all of the information available to them to make a decision. So one councillor going off, meeting with a group on their own to get information does not lend itself to a good decision as a body.
Councillor Ramirez?
Thanks, Your Worship. I appreciate if people don't lecture others how to be a councillor. That'll be appreciated by myself. My point is having the debate here. I'm not presupposing a decision here. So people need to understand that this is a debate. And if they don't like it, they have an opportunity during the debate itself to say no to it.
Councillor Suzman?
Thanks, Mayor Milligan. Bringing this forward, my intention is to assess those pros and cons. And I would say that, you know, when we routinely are raising taxes, not something that I'm automatically opposed to, by the way. There's not really a dialogue with people about that. That's just a thing that happens to them. They just get the bill for what it is, and there it is. And I think that to the extent that Fernie's a small to middling sized town that supports probably 3 or 4 times its population in terms of users of our services, I actually think that that's really a question we should ask. And I don't really think we need to overhaul the bylaw probably to do that. I think just looking at it, seeing what that would look like if we were to tweak that. And I'm sure I've angered a lot of my Sparwood buddies who really like to come here and use all our amenities by opening this discussion. But I think that who we work for is the city of Fernie voter / taxpayer. And I think that in their best interest, we should have that discussion. I'm not talking about, you know, 100% cost recovery where we charge $50 or $80 or whatever it is for a swim. I'm talking about moving the needle from 90-10 to 80-20 kind of thing. You know, it goes from $6.50 to 10, or it goes from, you know, $20 to $24. It's not, for most people, life-changing change in costs. And I would add that as far as I'm aware, most of our facilities offer quite good deals to the octogenarian crowd and to those with disabilities, as I understand it. So that's not even on the table here in my mind.
So bringing the user fee bylaw to the drill down meeting as a starting point seems like a reasonable starting point.
I think that works. I just don't, I mean, I think it would be a high level review of it. Like, you know, to Councillor McIsaac's point, I'm just thinking of groups like the Dolphins who have already set their budget this year based on what our bylaw is, and to change it in March. There's the point about public participation. And I'm not sure that, you know, there's other things like implementing a visitor rate that will take more than a couple of weeks to iron out, right?
Yeah,
so
process-wise, yeah.
That's my initial thought, is that it would just be a high-level review of it for now.
I wonder if you
that
could,
works.
Yeah, I wonder if you could bring the user fee table in a spreadsheet such that we can change the dials a little bit and see what the impact is. Because I am, you know, I'm extremely conscious of 2 things. Public consultation, of course, but also, you know, impacts to people where even a slight change in the fee structure could be significant for some families in our community. So, you know, I just want to be sensitive to those things, and I don't object to having a look at it, but I think we want to understand the suite of impacts that the changes would make before we make any drastic changes, would be my instinct. Councillor Eddie Kelly and then Councillor Nixon.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just in the spirit of having the debate and having to start somewhere, I like your suggestion of the spreadsheet, and then we sort of know what we're looking at, and then we can expand on that as as we see fit, having community consultation and all those other things. I would worry about some of our families that the impact, and there'd be some, for me, I'd want to have a mitigation for that. But we have to start somewhere.
Mhm.
So at least if we got a look at it for now.
Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Worship. Just a question for Director Logan. Maybe he knows this or not, but just curious. Do you have any idea how many out of towners we have at the community center now? Probably not. Eh?
The community center? Zero.
So, well, I don't know. It's still, that community center has $85,000, so there better be somebody going there. But the aquatic center, just curious. And I mean, all of our facilities, like when you think about it, you know, like the arena and the curling rink, how many people are from out of town that we would be able to scrounge another $2 out of or something like that?
Unfortunately, I don't have a number because we don't actually track the difference between citizens and visitors. However, there are examples like swimming lessons where we know for a fact that we get people from Calgary that live there that come to Fernie because the swimming lessons are significantly cheaper. And because of that, we have waiting lists for swimming lessons. Same goes for hockey practices. Our ice is cheaper than bigger centers. So there is a population of visitors or people in Fernie that are using our facilities because they're cheaper than other locations. So I'm interested in exploring what it might look like for a visitor rate and a local rate. It's something we've talked about internally as a team. Implementation of it is unknown, and I'd love to explore what other opportunities I know the other munis are doing to address that in specific resort municipalities.
Councillor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. I don't know if my memory is getting worse. Why do I have a feeling that we actually had this discussion not long ago? Didn't we look at the?
We
Was
had
it 2 years
we
ago?
had the user fee bylaw before, a couple of years ago.
Was that 2 years ago? I thought it was
Or
last year.
Maybe early in 2024.
Sorry, so the bylaw itself gets reviewed every 3 years. When it was first implemented in 2020, we came back actually earlier than that for some improvements to some holes that we saw as staff. Prior to 2020, the rates and the structure of rates was significantly improved from the previous bylaw and actually brought us up to a place where it was a much better than it was before. And I can't speak to numbers, it's before my time. All I can say is that the rate structure, having a local, non-local rate for specific events was a huge improvement. And there has been, some gains as far as the income received from renting facilities, using facilities. And the improvements in 2020 were significant compared to what we were using before.
Sorry.
That was not the, maybe I asked the wrong, maybe my question was not clear. So I thought, did we approve this it was my question.
Yeah, so the bylaw is always approved with 3 readings. So council has adopted the bylaw as it sits. I do also remember discussions on potentially doing a local, non-local. And I can't remember that far back to say, to know what information we brought forward to council. Yeah, the direct, yeah.
Councillor Audia Kelly and then Councillor Hamilton.
Thanks, Your Worship. I know Director Logan, just slightly before you joined us, that was one of the things that the Leisure Board was really a hot topic to, was those non-local, not impacting our local taxpayers, but looking at, the hockey, for example, and the Canal Flats was always one that came up, right? Because that arena was basically a auxiliary Calgary arena, right? And we talked about that very much, especially those of us that were hockey oriented on the Leisure Board, of ice being used, like in the way you were saying, and swimming lessons being used. And then our staff is getting naturally complaints from local people that can't get their kids into swimming lessons. So it's been a hot topic for quite a lot of years.
Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just pulled up the dates. Meeting council minutes was December 19th, 2023, when this council adopted the
Thank
user
you.
fee bylaw.
Thank you. Councillor Schusman? Okay. Mr. Burdett? Councillor Remus, are you not using a camera anymore? Can you work with Councillor Ramanus to get his city laptop organized, please, so that he can participate? Thank you. Mr. Burdett.
Thank you. This highlights facilities owned by the municipality where services are provided, either like in the case of the chamber, for example, through a partnership agreement. In that case, it's delivering visitor services, or for the other facilities through annual funding contributions, which have traditionally been called grants. These amounts do not include specific event-related agreements, such as funding for Wednesday night socials, Grizz Days, Light Up the Night, and so on. Those events would be in addition to this slide. This is just for the facility. This slide and the next touch on our other facilities, revenue and maintenance. Of note here is the courthouse. Service BC agreement expires in 2 months. And it's possible that they may not want to occupy the courthouse anymore, in which case quite a bit less revenue comes in for the facility. This slide has the Community Center, Arts Council, Cemetery, and Seniors Drop-in Center.
Thank you.
All of which are fairly steady here, except the community center, which obviously can no longer generate rental revenue. The Max Turek rental revenue has been increased a little bit to offset this, as they're seeing an uptake in rentals. There is a report coming forward to minimize operating expenses for the community center, depending on a decommissioning strategy. This is a breakdown of our public works department. Most increases
Sorry,
are.
Mr. Burdett.
Yep.
I apologize. Will we see a decommissioning strategy as part of this budget cycle?
There is a placeholder. I'll ask Mr. Logan to come up.
Just a moment.
So I'm currently working on gathering data, getting some estimates on demolition, and formulating a plan with my staff. I haven't yet begun that report, and depending on what other things come up, such as outdoor ice, I may be able to expedite that report, but likely not in time for the discussion for budget.
Councillor Ramanus?
Thanks, Your Worship. I have a technical question, CFO. There is a line item in the package that says contra asset or something. Is that related to the community center? What is that? What was it, 3.8 million or something?
Oh, that's another different accounting treatment related to the amortization of our capital assets. So again, like normal companies, you would just debit amortization expense, credit accumulated amortization on your balance sheet. But with local governments, amortization expense is not, like, it doesn't generate tax. It's not something that you have to pay for. So there's a contra line in the revenue side that offsets it in terms of calculating tax increase. Another bizarre public sector accounting rule.
Yeah.
It's just a wash, then it doesn't, it's just a.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Which is a good segue, because my next slide has another strange accounting wash that I will discuss. But
Councillor Shoesmith, you had your hand up? Okay. Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Worship. I know that we received a report on the cemetery. I don't know when that was. Maybe was it last year or the year before? It's all clan blurring together. Will we be receiving a review of the fees and stuff like that on the cemetery at some point? Because right now it's.
thanks, Councillor Nixon. Great data. We have gathered all of we've gathered some comparative information about that and are intending to have a look at the bylaw for cemetery fees. I don't have a date right now to share with you, but it's something we're working on as well.
Yeah, thank you for resisting. Ouch.
So this slide is breakdown on our Public Works Department. Most increases are due to contractual obligations. Waste and recycling is up because of the organics program now running, for which we collect additional revenue for that. For snow removal, though, and this is a bit of an accounting system thing, but a lot of the increase in snow removal is due to our internal equipment charge out rate that we have in the system, and we update it every year. So if a piece of equipment is used for an hour, that equipment has an hourly rate in the system, and it's credited out of our operations admin allocation and then into the various departments. So that charge out rate is really how we measure how much equipment cost gets charged to each department. And it's also meant to give us a ballpark for how we fund our fleet reserve. So to illustrate this more, this is our mobile equipment category. And you can see that big negative line item there of 1.3 million. That's all of the equipment hours expected to be charged in 2025. And then the other side of that journal entry goes into the various departments like snow removal. So to go back, you see a big jump in snow removal there. And it's also offset by this big jump in revenue from charge out. So it's not an actual amount that we charge tax for. It's just how our equipment rates work. The most alarming thing about this big negative number is it's supposed to inform how much we put away in our equipment reserve. But you know, in the last quite a while, our equipment reserve contributions has remained flat. But as we'll look at on Tuesday, we have a pretty solid equipment replacement plan now, and that reserve remains not really and too alarming yet.
Sorry, can you flip back,
Sure.
Mr. Burnett? Forgive me. Can you run through that one more time where that charge out comes from?
Yep. So each piece of equipment in our system has a rate.
Yeah.
You know, call it a blue book rate, and we update that every year. So then, if snowplow operator goes to plow roads, he gets the grader, and on his timesheet he'll put what unit number it is, and it gets entered into the system. And so if it was on that grader for 6 hours, it'll be 6 times the hourly rate. The journal entry will be credit operations admin and debit snow removal.
Okay.
Yeah. So in terms of how we budget for that, just to put a proper dollar amount on equipment costs for snow removal, that's one of the things that rate is used for.
So those hours reside in operations admin and are charged out to various functions.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the things that
Sorry.
Councilor Kaiser.
Sorry, I was just going to say what I understood from what you were saying to see if it was clarifying, and that was that we do that because different pieces of equipment get used by different departments, and that way we can figure out what the cost per department is for, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So the charge out rate entry, the credit and debit, that doesn't drive tax increase. What drives tax increase is our actual mobile equipment expenses like fuel and insurance and things like that, which back to this next slide is that 732,000. That has all of our fuel, all of our fleet insurance, some salaries spent on maintaining our mobile equipment, things like that. This is our safety department, fairly flat from 2024, nothing really of note here. This slide is our transfer to reserves, which goes back a few years, and it was really originally meant to illustrate for council the reduction after 2020 in reserve transfers since taking on the loan for that operations facility. So I've got the 2 years prior on the right there. having said that, council will remember that despite the fact that transfers to reserves were meant to be higher prior to 2021, the fact that we had to do the ops facility loan at all is, we touched on this earlier, kind of outside the point of 2025 budget, but I just feel it's necessary to briefly remind council of that. And so lastly, here's our preliminary shortfall for 2025 again. And some of the increases to costs and revenues that contribute to that. Green is good, red is bad. It's just over 636,000. Last year, for reference, the shortfall was 550,000. Shortfall translates to a 6.8 tax increase. Last year it was 6.1. At any point between now and February 25th, council can have a look at where we might be able to adjust certain service levels or perhaps delay certain projects or ask me questions. But this is the draft operating budget package that's included to your binders. Oh, and then for those that are a little more visual with their data, this is a waterfall chart. The left column is the 2024 budget, which is represented at starting point 0. And then the cost shortfall goes up or down as you move to the right of the graph. Orange is down, blue is up, ending at just over that 600K shortfall.
Councilor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. This is not the last slide, is it? Two more, but okay. Anyway, I want to compliment for the work that you've done, CFO. This is getting better and better. Compared to last year, this is even better. It's fantastic. Like just a little bit of a personal anecdote here, Your Worship. Like I was sitting with some of my colleagues today at work, and they said, "Oh, what are you doing at the council meeting?" And I said, "We'll have a budget presentation." And they all said, "Ah, that's very riveting." And I said, "You should come here and see some of these slides. You will actually be riveted." So, well done. Just one business question, Your Worship. I don't know how much time this will take. I just have to ask this. What will happen if we don't do OCP this year and push it out to next year?
Specifically, I would say the hiring of a staff person to focus on OCP work, using the grant to provide the capacity to hire someone to do the OCP work would be a little bit in question. So we'd have to look at what we sacrifice to offset the use of that grant and hold it and try and negotiate. But I would ask Director Lennox to speak a little bit to the obligations from the province on the OCP amendment and deadlines. In terms of what would happen, I'll answer a little bit once he's done.
Yeah, thank you, Council. Through to Mayor, through to the Council. Bill 44, the provincial legislation has required that Council adopt or look at updating and reviewing the OCP prior to the end of 2025. It has to be specifically the changes to the OCP have to follow what has transpired with the interim housing needs report that went to council in December. So that report, council may require stipulated 5-year growth densities for the number of dwelling units. It was 110 per year for 5 years, and thereafter for the next 15 it was 87 dwelling units. So the OCP in particular with this update has to follow the needs of providing changes to the maps and the policies to facilitate the development of that density. So one of the, and also as a result of that, we'd have to amend our zoning bylaw. So Councillor Ramadas mentioned what we've done in terms of trying to incentivize density. I recollected the R4, the R5R zone, the rental zone that we developed. That's like one tool that could be used elsewhere in the city to encourage rental density, that increase the dwelling unit density, I think, to 124 units per hectare, as opposed to 74 in our R4 zone. So that was a huge uplift in ability to create that type of housing. So, you know, hopefully we'll see proliferation of that type of zone throughout the city. But basically, we're required by legislation to specifically deal with housing in particular. And based on that, staff felt that there's other schedules, particularly related to the sewer and water master plan, and there's a Schedule T about housing capacity in terms of identifying certain areas of the city and the amount of density we can get in those areas. We certainly need to update those. Those are sorely lacking in terms of what needs to be done with our new water and sewer model. So we're also looking at updating that with this housing or OCP update.
Further?
So, Your Worship, did I hear here that it's non-negotiable? Like,
Yes, it's particularly in if I may, Your Worship,
Yeah,
particularly in relation to the need to implement, this is the key focus with our provincial government, is to get as many dwelling units as possible, identifying areas where they could go, looking at bottlenecks in terms of water and sewer capacities. All of that will be addressed in our OCP, and for the future viability of the city and increasing our tax base and increasing not only residential but commercial industrial development, we need to do that. So, and again, that's the end of this year, the end of December of 2025.
That's a hard deadline.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Ida Kelly?
Thanks, Your Worship. This isn't OCP related. This was CFO, our loan payment that's going to be
No, stay there.
going to be finished. What does that equate to in percent if we were just to keep paying it, but paid it into reserves?
Like if council elected not to put that back into reserves, it'd be like 6.2% ish this year.
6.2 versus 6.8.
Oh, no, sorry. Like that 600K would reduce it by
No, I'm saying like we're paying it off. So we obviously had to tax to pay it.
no, because when we entered into that agreement, council reduced contributions to reserves.
Reduced.
Yeah,
Okay.
so the idea of putting them back up to regular after it was done.
Okay. So if we wanted to keep as if we were paying it, yeah, okay. Gotcha.
If I might, the CFO says regular, still not meeting the recommended rates.
Councillor McIsaac?
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, I'm going to go back to OCP. I'm not exactly sure where Councillor Ramadas is going with this, but I want to explore this a little bit with your permission. What Mr. Lennox was saying, in the Bill 44, it does require that our municipalities update the OCP every 5 years with specific respect to the planning for house building for the next 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't actually say, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not certain, that all of the other aspects have to necessarily be completed at the same time. And it just got me wondering, I don't know if this should be debating this right now, but OCPs are huge. We absolutely need to do ours because it hasn't been done in quite a while. We need to update it. The community is changing and we need to anticipate that. We need to hear from the community what kind of changes they're looking forward to. But it does make me wonder, with the relatively limited resources that we have and the very busy tables that all of our staff have in front of them, if there would be value in, say, chunking up our OCP reviews over a number of years. So, Mr. Lennox was saying, for example, we've got water and sewer components and subdivision servicing, and there's a whole breadth of things in there. And rather than going, let's try to eat the whole elephant all at once, but tackling, say, specifically the housing one this year, which is legislated, we're required to go and do that, but we're not necessarily required to finish off the other ones. Could we make a plan over the next couple of years, like say next 2 years or 3 years, to break that up into chunks and do it in that way? I don't know if that's realistic, and maybe Mr. Lennox or
I'd like
Mr.
Director
Dombrowski
Lennox to speak to that.
could talk to about that. Yeah.
Yeah, just for council's edification I was just reading actually earlier this evening. In regard to we have the interim housing report. We're getting actually ahead of the curve in terms of what they call the regular housing needs report. It doesn't have to be done until the end of 28. But we felt that to get ahead of the curve, we should include that with this with CP update. So that would look at policy development in relation to a number of specifics that are actually outlined in a regulation that I won't get into. So that I think is important that we should do that. We are going to be bringing, like we have done, a request for proposals, and we're evaluating 4 proposals that we've received from consultants right now. They actually have sort of segmented the development of the OCP over 2 years, or even a little longer. So I think actually, in fact, we are sort of following what Councillor Isaac has suggested. But for the first part of the development, we are focusing on meeting that deadline with the province. But we will, just to follow through, we will be bringing that staff report to council shortly. We still haven't made we're down to 2 proposals. We haven't made the final decision yet. So we are bringing that to a leadership meeting next week to deliberate that. And then following that, or the manager of planning will do a staff report making a recommendation for a contract award to council. But you'll see in the schedule that it does segment various components of the OCP over a 2+ year timeframe.
Thank you, Director Lennox. Councillor Ravidas.
Thanks, Your Worship. I just now recollecting, Councillor, Director Simulini actually told us that exact same thing, that he will be staging many things, and actually we said, oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
But we're making so many decisions that we forget what they were. And just to add to what Councillor was saying, back in UBCM, if you remember, Your Worship, someone was talking about OCP on a page, if you remember. I don't know to what extent that is possible, but
Yeah, I wouldn't even guess. It's a pretty hefty document.
yeah.
But just out of curiosity, Director Lennox, it can be segmented, but it can't be completely segmented, because as you advance the housing discussion, there has to be consideration of the supporting infrastructure for that. So that has to come into that conversation. So just how segmented can it be, I guess, is my question.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. We're, like I said, we're meeting next week, and we've been discussing internally the importance of, like right now, we have a Schedule T in our CP that identifies certain areas of the city that have a density maximums. For example, we were talking about Trico earlier, so it's got Trico and it's got some other areas for higher density development and when that was done, that was just based strictly using zoning density, didn't consider water and sewer capacity constraints. So we want to ensure that, with the new schedules, that it considers the realities of our infrastructure system. So that obviously will have to be developed, to your point, Mayor Milligan, in unison.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because sorry, Director Lennox, we want to avoid isolating certain parcels because we haven't considered the other impacts, including water and sewer, for example.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Further, while we have the director at the mic, Councillor Ravidas.
The reason I asked that question was just purely from a cost perspective, yours.
Oh, yeah, no, I appreciate that.
That was the only reason I was saying,
Yeah.
can we push it outwards? But if it's a regulatory thing and, it has many unintended consequences, well, let's not go there.
No, I think it's a fair question, though. Absolutely. Thank you, Director Lennox.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Mr. Burdett.
Thank you. After that waterfall chart, I just had one more slide reminding council of Tuesday night's meeting, which we'll be going through capital plan.
Okay.
But Councillor Adia Kelly had a question. Excuse me, if your tax bill in 2021 was $1,000, with this 2025 projected increase, it would be $1,270. So 27% over those 4 years.
Over 4 years.
Thanks, CFO.
Further, we're still on live in a meeting. Let's not have debates across the table without microphones, please, so people can hear it. Other questions for Mr. Burdett or any other member of staff who's present? Seeing none? Thank you, Mr. Burdett. That was very thorough. And
Thank you.
I know you corrected me today that this was our 4th budget meeting as we were walking out of City Hall because I made some crack about our first big budget meeting. But thank you. That was very useful and good start of the discussion. So if there's nothing else, we will adjourn the meeting for this evening. Thank everybody for joining us and yeah, have a great evening. And thank you all the staff who've supported this evening.